Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this evening's meeting of the Community and Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Just a reminder for those that are attending virtually to ensure that phones are muted. If you are speaking, please do turn your camera and unmute yourself. If you are not, please do keep your camera off. We have a mixture of people in the meeting and outside the meeting today. But first things first, have we received any apologies for absence, please, Callum?
None submitted, Chair.
Okay. Minutes of the previous meetings. So there was a couple. So we had two meetings, one on the 6th and one on the 3rd. The 3rd I was unfortunately unable to attend at short notice. So going through the minutes on the 6th, we will go through. So first things first. For the 6th of October, page 5. 6. 7. Yes, Clive?
Thank you, Guy. In the first paragraph, it says it's hoped that the borough's MPs will lobby ministers on working on borough council's behalf. This is to receive a fair funding settlement. Has that happened? Do we know if that's happened?
I think that's more addressed to Councillor Kaiser and to Graham.
And if it has, which ministers did the MPs try to get hold of? If it hasn't, half this say it hasn't.
Councillor Kaiser, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you, Guy. Sorry, I had a bit of a problem. What was it? What was asked?
Basically, John, on page 7 of the minutes, basically there was asking to lobby government ministers by borough MPs to basically ensure that we had a fair settlement. Has that been taken up with them?
Yeah, we've done that all the time. We've had conversations with John Redwood. I personally had a conversation with John Redwood. Theresa May, we've spoken to Theresa May, and we've also had communications with James Sunderland. They know our plight, they know our issues, and we will constantly be speaking to them about lots of issues that we've got coming down the pipe. And we're working on another letter at the moment, which will go off, which will no doubt cover social care. Or adult care, sorry.
Okay. Clive, do you want to any other point on that?
Yeah. John, do we know which ministers they've spoken to?
Yeah, the Theresa May has spoken to the man, Mr. Gove, and she came back and she said, well, she couldn't really offer anything other than, well, you'll see when you get your settlement, but we have made it very clear to them that issues around things such as the new homes bonuses, they're a very important part of our budget. Though we don't take them all to budget, we actually do take a percentage of them, and the impact that would have on them. We'd also explained to them we have a gap both in the revenue and the capital programme.
Thank you, John. Got another question on that page.
Okay.
Which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs down. So we were talking about costs of materials, inflation, and labour issues. And the first bids that we looked at last time, that didn't include anything for the extra costs of materials, inflation, labour. I'm assuming that that's the case for this week as well.
It's probably more to Graham.
Yes, I was going to say by way of introduction that our process is to effectively create a lockdown 1 in terms of our financial position, and that is wholly consistent with the summary presented to you. Well, I think it might have been in July. So we're holding true to that. And I said that any changes would be brought together in a further iteration, and all those changes would be brought at the same time, and that would come following the outcome of the local government finance settlement, because that would be a key, potentially a key significant change.
Thank you. Thank you. If that's the case, page 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, Clive?
The penultimate paragraph on the page, this was discussions taking place with the police about changes in the community safety partnership. It says here that the discussions had been going on with the police since the beginning of the process, which was February, March of last year. My recollection was that what we were told was that the discussions had just started in whenever it was, I think it was September.
Was this a point you emailed earlier? Back on Callum, or am I going mad? Is he on the call?
Hello, yes.
Sorry, you're probably in the +9 section, Bill. Do you have any clarity on this?
Well, you know, the safety partnership is an ongoing procedure, and we had a recent meeting with the new actual commander of the police, and it's an ongoing thing. Now, when it first started, I couldn't really answer. I came into post, and it was community safety partnership was already up and running. So, as far as I'm concerned, it's an ongoing issue and still being dealt with. Is that what you're asking?
I only bring it up because when we were told this on the 6th of October, that the discussions had just begun, I was actually quite surprised that they had only just begun. But
I think
maybe we could have a look at the video and just see if I'm right. Maybe I'm wrong.
I can't
Happened.
remember. Callum? Oh,
If members are happy, I can rewatch the video and just double check that point. And if that wasn't what was said, I'll just amend it in the minutes, if that's okay.
That's fine.
no objection. Page 13. And 14. Okay, with that gone through, with those action points noted and a change if required, can I have a vote in favour of accepting those minutes, please? All those in favour? 2, 3. Anyone against? Abstentions? Okay, that's carried though. Thank you. Right, the meeting where unfortunately I was too ill to attend on the 3rd of November. Going through the pages, page 15. Shelley.
Observation really on the main floor of progress update, and that was that thank you Helen for sending out that full report today.
Sorry. Microphone, yeah, because they can't hear us.
Apologise. Yeah, thank you for sending out the full report that we'd asked for today. I'm just really stressing a point that I made at the end of that meeting, that had we had that report, I would have asked a lot more questions than I did, because we only had a 4-page PowerPoint presentation and the officer there. And I feel that we really must get sensible reports, otherwise we can't scrutinise. So it's just an observation really on that.
You are correct, Shirley. However, at the time, unfortunately, it wasn't completed. So we wouldn't have a chance to review it anyway. It's a bit out of our control in that regard. Alison, did you want to say something?
I think that should be in the minute.
Has anybody else lost the sound?
Alison's microphone is has decided to die on us.
Oh, no.
Now it's dying again. Now it's
Yeah,
working again.
I just wanted to itemise in the minutes the reports that we, as Shirley correctly pointed out, they would have been invaluable to aid our scrutiny of that item.
So we'll put that in at page 23 as example by the BME forum report earlier in the meeting. Just put that in as a comment. Anything on 17? 18? Clive?
Thank you, Guy. There's a paragraph, 60% of the way down the page. Charles Margetts was telling us about the financial consequences of the government's adult social care reforms. And he said that they may well cost us £20 million. That doesn't appear in the minutes. I think when a figure like that is talked about, which would have a massive impact on the council's finances going forward, that it should actually be in the minutes.
Alison, can I look to you? Because I assume that was said. Unfortunately, I was not at this meeting and unwell enough to attend. If it was said, then it really should be in the minutes as a section in there in the pre-format.
I'd rather defer to what Callum had in his notes, to be honest.
Yeah, I believe it was said. I just omitted that. So yeah, I can add that in, Clive.
Page 19. 20. 21. 5.
Thank you, Guy. The paragraph that talks about the SEND school at Winnersh, it says a more detailed answer in relation to the potential delay of the school will be available within the next few weeks. I don't recall seeing it. I might have missed it, but I don't recall seeing it.
I haven't seen anything either, but we are only.
Well, I would say that the minutes are an accurate reflection of the meeting. So that's like a matters that arise in question, isn't it, Clive? Do we? I possibly John Kaiser could comment on that.
Well, yeah, it's not really my area, it's education, but I have been involved in the negotiation and there is a delay on the school. The people from the DFE, they're over optimistic about delivery. We got to a point where we've agreed, but it looks like it's going to be delayed 14 months, which is probably the build time. I am told that they're just about to let the contract. But with the greatest will in the world, it's not going to be ready before next Easter at the soonest. But the DFE has actually agreed that they will look at our costs, as they did lead us up the garden path to a certain degree, and we will be submitting our alternative arrangements and what they are likely to cost to the DFE. And we would expect them to recompense us for those additional costs.
Well, that's a small crumb of good news there, John. So thanks for that. Can we get the details sent through to us when we have it in due course? Okay. 22. 23. Alison, is this the point where we made on the BME forum? Yeah, could we?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that we all gave our praise and thanks to Carol specifically as she moves on to a new job, and I'd just like that added to the minutes.
Yep, no objection with that. Okay, seeing nods all around. Okay. Can I get a vote in favour of those minutes as amended? All those in favour? Okay. Against? Abstaining? Okay, thank you. All right, going back, so 1 moment, let's sign these in a minute. Declarations of interest, any declarations of interest? Not seeing any. Public question time, were any public questions submitted?
None submitted, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any members?
None submitted, Chair.
Okay, moving on to item number 53, the vegetation maintenance programme. Who is taking that?
Emma Pilgrim or Richard Bissett, Chair.
Is Emma or Richard around? I can see Richard and I can see Emma. There you are. Hello.
Good, Chair.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, absolutely fine. Thanks,
Excellent.
Chair.
And we can
Emma,
hear
I'll
you.
leave it
Excellent.
with you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Chairman, committee members and colleagues. Thank you for inviting us. I've got a short presentation for you. I'm Emma Pilgrim, one of the place clienting officers and responsible for the street cleansing and grounds maintenance contract. So I will share away. Now, is that visible for everyone? Just checking.
It's coming through our end.
Okay, brilliant. So, as I've said, I'm going to present on how our contracts deliver vegetation maintenance relating to our highways and footpaths. So there are a number of contracts which interact with one another to help deliver the maintenance of our highways and verges. These include our grounds maintenance contract, which is delivered by Tivoli Group Limited. This contract, aside from maintaining our parks and open spaces, is also responsible for maintaining over 130,000 square metres of council-owned hedge and shrubs, and a large proportion of which is adjacent to highway footpaths and roads. We have the highway reactive maintenance contract carried out by Volker Highways. This has highway inspectors based within the Volker's team who carry out health and safety inspections of the adopted highway, and they report vegetation which is causing an obstruction to the highway. And this is whether it's to us at the council so we can take action, or to the private landowners, which our highways team can enforce if required. And we have our street cleansing contract, which is also delivered through Volker Highways and subcontracted to Urbasa Limited. This provides street sweeping, cleansing, and including weed control of adopted roads, footways, and interlinking footpaths. So over the past year, we have come against some challenges, including some internal long-term sickness, as well as new work streams coming into the service, impacting capacity within the team. There has been an ongoing trend of unpredictable weather, likely to remain, which has led to a sustained and often extraordinary periods of vegetation growth for us to tackle. We also identified that whilst the reporting systems available to customers have improved, there is still further work that can be done to improve the front-facing and back-office aspects of the systems that we currently have in place, as these impact on the customer journey and how efficiently we can deliver our services. So, on reflection of these challenges, we've recognised some opportunities and changes which we have already put in place to improve the way that we work. We've evolved our model for clienting services to make sure that our approach to contract management delivers in the right ways. As a small team of contract managers, we relied on the localities team to help monitor the contracts and address customer queries amongst their other locality-based work. And throughout the pandemic, the localities team have been mobilised to help deliver some much needed services to the community. So it was therefore identified that a dedicated resource within place quarantine would be beneficial. So a contract monitoring officer has been recruited, as well as officers from environmental localities have also been utilised to keep reactive to our customers and to monitor our contracts as well. The reactive highways contract management role has been realigned with the highways team. So that's enabled us in clienting to focus on our core contracts of waste, street cleansing and grounds maintenance. And we're currently undertaking contract reviews and full maintenance of council-owned vegetation. After being put on an improvement plan, Tivoli have recruited a new contract manager and are underway with works across the borough to carry out substantial cutbacks to locations which have been identified as key areas, including cycleways and well-used routes to help prevent issues in 2022. We're also working with Volker Highways and Urbaza to make sure that the street cleansing is working in the most efficient way and is future-proofed, which includes addressing historic encroachment issues, which we are progressing, and each encroachment case is reviewed on an individual basis to consider health and safety implications, scope of work, and the cost associated with them. As we haven't got a set resource assigned to this, under the contract, we're considering how we can take a more proactive approach to these issues moving forwards. And moving on to our next steps. Our current plans are to continue working with our IMT team to deliver clearer reporting options for vegetation on the website. And this will cover both council-owned and private vegetation, and we're expected to deliver that in March 2022. A further layer, which is also being worked on to be delivered at a later date, is the plan to incorporate the mapping system to help direct reports to the right service areas and contractors. Options are also being explored to integrate the council-owned dynamic system and the highways reporting system to help prevent duplicates and help make the transition of reports to the different contractors more efficient and improve the customer journey. So to ensure the team will be robust moving forwards, we're currently proactively sourcing additional capacity for contract management, which aims to establish dedicated officer areas focused on the grounds maintenance and street cleansing contract, whilst working with other key teams across the council. And from these steps, we aim to work more efficiently and make sure our contracts deliver an improved environment for our residents and our visitors. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you. I can see plenty of questions coming up. I'm going to start off with those that appeared first in my line of sight. So it's going to be Phil, Shirley. So Phil, go first and I'll write down who's next.
Thank you for that presentation, Emma. I've got a question that hopefully you can clear up, please, because I've had lots of representations from local residents about verges being untidy and messy and making the place look awful. And then other comments from residents saying that they've been left to wilding and it's great for insects, etc. Could you give us some idea of how you decide when wilding has started to look untidy, and is there any chance that there could be clearer statements to either the councils and or the public as to when these are going to start, when they're going to finish, so that people know why verges are left as they are?
Yes, I'm happy to answer that. It's definitely a tricky one at the moment, and kind of historically as well. And we have been working with the task and finish group which is tied in with the trees and biodiversity plan, and spoke with them a few weeks back, kind of proposing what we could potentially do, because we really need a kind of clear plan that it's so residents can understand where we're doing what and why, because unfortunately otherwise no one's ever going to be happy. So it is a tricky balancing act, and that's why we've kind of highlighted that to that group. So we're hoping that can move forward through that way and through the members.
And in a lesson that I learned from Clive, I'd like to add another question. Thank you. With regards to curbside growth, once again, conversations with residents mix from why the hell don't the council do anything about the grass and other vegetation growing out from where the road joins the curb, to others saying, well, I can't wait for the council, so I've done it myself. I have concerns about people chopping into the edge of the tarmac with their hose, etc. So I think there's some work to be done there as well. I just wonder whether there could be a vegetation page which could appear on the website, and maybe, or even in the annual brochure that's sent around by the council, to say, just briefly, we do these, but these are the times when we do them. And this is what you can expect as residents, because obviously streets looking like they've got trees growing out of the curbstones aren't great, and residents want to start to take their own actions, which can't be great for the roads.
I would agree with that. It's not an easy job, and in particular when it's in relation to weeds coming in the curbstones and things like that. We did have a tricky year this past year in terms of weed spraying, so we are kind of adjusting the timing of our weed spraying for next year, and we're hoping that's going to be a bit more effective, so we can monitor that more closely and hopefully prevent too many complaints and issues.
Okay, thank you. Shirley.
Thank you, Guy, and thank you, Emma. I've got a couple of questions as well, and one does sort of allude slightly to grass growing, vegetation growing on the side of the carriageway where it hits the curb. And I think that the way to solve this would be, before the grass cutting season starts, to actually get all those cleared, sort of all that growth scraped away, so that you start off with a level playing field. Because I think what happens is, when we get a period where the verges start to go to seed, the grass gets long and goes to seed, they come and cut the grass, the seed then goes into the gutter and seeds in the debris that is left there. And then what residents say to me is then, of course, litter gets trapped and the whole thing does look a mess. So it could well be that maybe that's the answer, getting roads cleared before the grass cutting season starts. But my other point is a question, actually, and it's about street cleaning. And it's about when, on the website, if you have a look, and it tells you how frequently a street is going to be cleaned, and it also tells you when it was last cleaned. Now, I often look at this because I see streets that are looking pretty much of a mess, and I looked at one, funnily enough, this morning, which told me that London Road north of the A4 was cleaned on Monday. Now, I happen to be in London Road north of the A4, and it can't have been cleaned for weeks and weeks and weeks. So my question is, does that date automatically update whether the cleaning has happened or not?
Yes, on the website there is a kind of ongoing fed into automatic update, and I think
which is no use to man nor beast. It's about much use as a chocolate teapot, because if you look at it and it says that it's been cleared and it clearly hasn't, what do you do then? You don't know whether it's going to happen the next day because for some reason there was a delay. Do you follow? So having those dates there actually just makes residents more cross.
Yeah.
Steve, Richard, I saw your hand shut up quickly on this topic.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Shirley. It's a good point you raise about the street cleansing service, because street cleansing is very closely linked to vegetation and the quality of street cleansing. And Emma, Richard and myself have been focusing quite heavily on this and talking to the contractor, and Emma covered in a presentation there about the need for us to do some refinement of the contract and do some improvements with the quality of the environment. Street cleansing is very important. If you don't sweep the streets properly, you'll get a build-up of detritus in the channels and on the back line And as you quite rightly say, that will encourage germination and lead to weed spreading. So not one thing sits on itself. When we talk about environmental quality, it's all interlinked. So just be reassured that work is ongoing to make sure the street cleansing contract, which is actually, from my experience, a high specification of what we're demanding from Volkers, who obviously sub out to Abasta, but there is work to do. And we are carrying out that work, and Emma and Richard and the team are doing a fantastic job making sure that the product we have going forward, once that work's completed, will reduce down the likelihood of vegetation happening in the first place, because the cleansing will be done properly when it's supposed to be done. And just on your other point, I think we need to probably reflect on your question there about the days of cleansing. We're actually notifying residents, and from my experience, you can get operational difficulties and the like. It's very difficult, I suppose, to name a day of exactly when your road's going to be cleaned. I think what we need to do is we need to be very clear about the frequency of the cleaning that residents should expect within their areas, whether that's on a weekly basis, a daily basis, a fortnightly basis, whatever it might be, and then update that data as and when it happens. So we absolutely want our local communities and our residents to be involved, to be our eyes and ears, to make sure things are happening as it's supposed to be happening out there. But I think we've got some work to do in relation to reviewing the spec, reviewing the frequencies, and communicating that out to our residents so they truly understand it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Paul.
Thank you very much, Emma, for your presentation. I'm afraid a little moan, first of all, because it would have been helpful to actually have that presentation available when the agenda came out. There is nothing on the public website. So, yeah, I've got the public website open at the moment. There's nothing on it. So it's not showing. It would have been useful to have that. But it's good to hear about the yeah.
I'm sorry, I think you'll find it is on the website.
Yes, Paul, it is. I'm looking at the agenda pack that was sent through. It is in
Okay.
there.
Well, I haven't received it.
I don't know.
So
Need to update your computer.
And it is exactly, and it's there on the public website now.
okay.
That might be an updated version.
It might be, but there was something on the website.
Okay. If there was something wrong with my system previously, then do apologise, but I couldn't open it earlier. It's good to hear about improved, clearer reporting systems coming through. I think that is absolutely crucial, because that is one of the problems which residents have had. Vegetation maintenance is reactive, as you said, and not proactive. Is there a way that could be changed so we don't keep going back to or having to report particular sites time and time again? So that could be on a proactive schedule to do them either annually or twice a year.
Yes, so we do have some proactive works that are undertaken in terms of vegetation maintenance. I think historically there's been some issues with getting or particularly highway hedges mapped, and we've been working on updating that as we go on and keeping a log of the areas that are coming up more regularly, so we can program in works over the winter period, and that's what we're doing this winter. And we've kind of made sure that the kind of key areas, including the cycleways and areas that we know have been reported in the past, can be hit really hard during the winter period. With the kind of growth that we've been seeing during the summer, we're still expecting to have to do an aspect of reactive work, but we ideally want to do as much as possible in that winter period outside of bird nesting to hit the vegetation hard, so it's less likely to be an issue in the summer period.
Yeah, you mentioned cycleways. That is quite a high priority, because there's some I have reported through where you've got a 3.5 metre shared footway cycle route and 2 metres of it is covered in vegetation. So you've got a usable width of 1.5 metres less the 450 from the curb line, less 450 from the vegetation, which doesn't leave you a lot at all for people to actually get through. Highway inspections you mentioned, and the enforcement of private hedges under the Highways Act 1980. How is that processed by the highway inspection team?
So I don't deal directly with the highway inspections, but the process, my understanding is that when a report comes in and it's identified as private vegetation, Volker Highways will inspect and send out a letter to the resident. If there's no improvement in terms of the vegetation being cut back, that will be passed on to the highway asset team and they can enforce on that. But I can see that Andy Glencross has popped up and will be able to correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, and Andy Andy showing us off this evening in his lovely location. Go ahead, Andy.
I was just going to say Emma's got it bang on. Paul, you already know that the contractor cannot legally enforce it. So we do the first letters to the residents to ask them to cut it back themselves. If that doesn't work, then it gets passed back to Iris and Gareth, and they send out the second letters and take the legal enforcement route.
Okay, thank you for the clarification on that. So when it comes to WBC's vegetation and how does does first of all the highway inspectors pick those up and process those back in any particular way?
So the highway inspectors would, if they've identified something and it's been confirmed as council owned, that would come to our team in Place Lighting and we would issue works to the grounds maintenance contractors Tivoli to cut back.
And my final one, you mentioned about oh no, you've answered that one already. Sorry.
Someone else stole a question. It was being answered this time, Paul, instead of you stealing one of mine. Anne.
Yes, good evening. Actually, I would just like to say that I feel this report does lack detail. So that's one thing I wanted to say. And then a very basic point, what does place clienting mean? Because I don't know whether the public would know what that means. I certainly don't.
Stephen?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's contract management, Councillor. So effectively, obviously, when we choose to tender out a contract to a third party, and they're obviously contractually obliged to deliver certain things, this is how we make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing and we're getting value for money.
So it means something contractually?
It's like if we want the street cleansing contractor, so the street cleansing contractor will win a contract based on their bid, won't they? And they'll say, I will do X on X days and those sorts of things. What a client function does is it ensures what they say they're going to do actually happens. So it has a monitoring function, yeah, and a contractual compliance function. And obviously has the ability to default if things don't happen correctly, and also looks at things on a more positive note, looking at how you can look to improve, use more innovation jointly with the contractor about how we can be more efficient. So it's the intelligence, I suppose, if you like, within the council and the organisation to make sure, one, we're getting what we're supposed to be getting, and two, making sure if there's a need to vary the contract, adapt the contract, do things slightly differently, then we can be proactive about that. Okay,
thank you. So some of my questions have been answered, but I was wondering, if you get a resident's request, how do you respond to the resident? In this case that you're talking about, where you would write to a resident about overgrown vegetation, I know of a case where a resident is complaining about overgrown vegetation on property which is being rented out, and it seems to be getting nowhere. What do you do in that sort of situation? So you see, the resident won't know who owns the property.
If it's private vegetation, I would probably have to defer to Andy again on that.
Hi, Anne. I think you're right. There's always that issue about rented accommodation. Ultimately, my understanding is the sanction we could lift is we send the letter out legally enforcing it. The end of that process, if people really refuse to cut back the vegetation, is that we would cut it back and serve them with a bill. Now, that bill would go to the registered owner of the property eventually.
Right.
How we do that?
And I mean, do you pursue, so, you know, if you get 50 complaints from residents about vegetation, which is on the land of rented property, are there 50 processes that are implemented to resolve it, or do most of them sort of get sort of stuck?
Percentages, you mean, of which ones get resolved through the?
Yes.
My understanding is the majority get resolved by people actually cutting it back when we serve them the first letter. It's a minority, a small minority that end up with actual legal enforcement, which is a good thing because it's an expensive and difficult process to go through.
Yes, but my point is, in this case where the property's rented, so the person complaining doesn't know who the owner of the property is, what happens to that? Does that get stuck, or does the council somehow proceed with it?
So if a person puts in a report saying this vegetation is overhanging the highway, we will go and inspect it. We will decide whether it's private vegetation or public vegetation. And if it's private vegetation, we will drop in a letter at the house that the property, the vegetation belongs to, irrespective of whether it's rented or owner occupied. So at that point, there's a telephone number and various details on it. They can get in touch with. If they don't get in touch with us, then we will proceed to the next step. But ultimately, we will go back to the owner of the property.
Right, and so this resident, by what means should they submit their query that will get into the system? Would it be via the Woking Borough Council website, going through the correct tab?
I think that's exactly right. As Emma has pointed out, there is a slight duplication about the fact there's a Volcas process for obstruction of the highway, and there's a overgrown vegetation process on our website for the Tivoli contract, I believe, isn't there, Emma? But either of those should get that in the system.
Right. Okay. Well, I hope that's the case then. Thank you. Oh yes. Do you currently make heavy use of herbicides? And if so, do you have plans to change this in the future to improve biodiversity?
Do you want me to pick that one up, Emma? Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Real topical point, really topical point. Many councils talking about this, councillor, about whether to spray roads and weeds or not, or just let them grow and flourish. So that's a question for members. That's a question of what policies you would want to see us introduce as a council. What I can tell you from experience is those authorities that have moved away from herbicide treatment have very quickly reintroduced it because of the amount of complaints they get from people, because weeds and that can also cause obstructions on the highways for people. So it's something I think that members might want to consider very carefully about moving to more greener ways of herbicide treatment. For example, if we used a chemical that was non-glyphosate based, which is most weed spraying organisations use Roundup, which is one of the safest chemicals out there at the moment, way safer than anything you could buy from B&Q or anything like that, just as a member of the public, then that works quite effectively. But if you moved away from that, the cost of a non-glyphosate chemical is a lot more expensive than a glyphosate chemical. Some authorities might move down a hand weeding program, so we'll weed by hand. That's fine. That would probably cost you 10 times as much. So this is a budgetary issue as much as it's an environmental one, and it's a difficult challenge. It is, because many councils are now being questioned about whether to use herbicides or not, or pesticides or not, are they commonly known. So I think it's one you could debate one here for quite a long time about whether it's a good thing or a bad thing to do, but maybe it's something that maybe through the environmental discussions in the organisations, those things can be looked at as we go forward. There isn't an easy answer. But as I said at the start, those councils who have gone very green with this issue and moved away from herbicide treatment have been subject to many, many complaints that are coming locally from their residents.
Okay, thank you. I've finished now.
Thank you, Anne. I'm going to quickly come in with a question in a sec, but on the herbicides thing, I remember a council on the south coast, which is popular with holidaymakers and conferences from time to time. I believe they'd had to pay out over 6 figures in compensation complaints due to the fact that their pavements have been so poorly maintained due to weeds. It's caused numerous injuries, including to someone who told me about this in the first place when they nearly broke their ankle. But just on the comment from earlier about the converging of the two systems due to the lack of correspondence between them, as it were. What's exactly being done to basically bring those two systems together into a single reporting structure? And then we'll go to Clive, as he was next on my list, but I'm taking advantage of that as Anne raised it in the first place.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Emma, do you want me to grab that one?
Yeah, happy for you to take that.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Chair. So what's been happening is that we've recognised there is a difference in terms of the two reporting systems that are on the website. One is through highways, and also the other one is through a customer delivery aspect. So what we've worked through with IT is to try and get a fix between the two. So when one person reports on one, it automatically reports on the other, and it goes through to the contractor. That's either a baser, that's either Tivoli, or that's straight through to highways to get resolved. So that work is already underway, and we expect that should be completed by Q1 next year at the very latest.
Are we referring to a calendar year or a fiscal year?
April. Just to be clear.
Thank you. Okay, at least it's work in progress, and hopefully it will work swimmingly. Clive, hopefully I've stolen one of your questions for a change.
Not quite, Guy, but thank you very much. Page 28, opportunities and progress made. It says utilised environmental localities. I don't know what that means.
So we've got an environmental localities team, so they deal with fly tipping and enforcement, and they have worked on contract monitoring as well in the past. So utilising them as a force kind of on the ground, being able to deal with customer queries and having a look at works completed and assessing the works carried out by our contractors.
I'll just add a little bit to that as well, if you like, Clive. So we recognise that localities have a really good part to play, but now we're looking at their roles changing very slightly, and we are very keen on ensuring the customer journey is correct, and also understanding what our contracts are undertaken out there and making sure they are undertaken correctly. So therefore, we have put in a bid, which we discuss a bit later in this agenda, to increase our place cliented team for another 2 contract monitoring officers. And they will undertake checks of both a baser, who's our street cleansing, and Tivoli, who's our grounds maintenance, to ensure everything is undertaken, and also to work through any customer queries and be proactive and discover things before they become an issue.
Thank you. Thank you very much, both of you, for those explanations. I'm all in favour, and I'm sure all the other councillors here are, of improving the customer journey. We might improve our journey if you'd written improving customer journey instead of utilised environmental localities.
Duly noted.
I didn't understand what it meant. The line above that is establish a contracts monitoring officer. Have we had one of these before?
Do you mean previously in the past?
I assume this is a new appointment, is it?
Yes, so we had an officer join in July, I believe, to work in the team. So previously it had been kind of, that monitoring aspect had been carried out by the environmental localities team. But like I said, during the pandemic, their kind of priorities shifted. So we knew that there needed to be a focus within our team so we could work proactively on dealing with customer queries related to the contracts of street cleansing and grounds maintenance.
Did we have a contracts monitoring officer 4 or 5 years ago? And was it one of the posts that was lost with 21st Century Council?
I think 4 or 5 years ago, we would have been working as cleaner and greener. So we had performance officers kind of doing a bit of everything in terms of contract management and the customer aspect as well.
That reads as redefined. Sam.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I just want to say how pleased I am that you're all looking at this. I mean, this is such an important issue which comes up on our doorsteps again, and again. I mean, I cannot emphasize, I bet every council here it's come up constantly. I mean, I'd be really, really keen to know, what are the typical SLAs? I mean, for example, do you have an SLA where a curb in our borough is cleaned X once a year? Are roads clean? Are there different SLAs for a road versus a curb? I mean, what do they look like? And if they do exist, are they looking to be improved or changed?
So in terms of the service level agreements, we've got different ones for our street cleansing and our grounds maintenance contractors. In terms of street cleansing, we've got different schedules for sweeping, and that varies from one road to another. So it might be that most kind of suburban roads will be done on a 6-weekly cleanse, and more kind of higher use areas will be fortnightly or 4-weekly. In terms of vegetation cutting back by our grounds maintenance contractor, that does vary in terms of the service level agreement, because the priorities are going to vary from one space to another. If there's something that's potentially going to be a claim for damage to fencing or it's obstructing the highway, we'd expect a quicker response in terms of being able to cut that back quickly. But the main thing in terms of in the contract for the SLA, it's related to us being updated on their progress rather than the works being carried out. So that's something we want to look at moving forward to make sure it is kind of fit for purpose and it's delivering on what it needs to.
I think on that as well, Sam, is just looking at, you know, what the current situation is across grounds as well as street cleansing, and determining those kind of actions and that undertaking that review, which we're currently undertaking at the moment, just to make sure that we get the right services in place in terms of the frequencies as well as equipment. And then we'll also identify any efficiencies out of this as well.
My other question was, with regards to the vegetation, unless you get a resident or one of the councils reporting it, do you have, what's the system of sort of checking? I mean, how does that work? I mean, because that's something which I think, as Phil mentioned, you know, I've got curbs in my ward where it looks like there's trees growing out of the side of the roads, where the weeds are so high. So what's that? Is there like a spotter, or is there what's the sort of process?
Stephen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just going to say, I think Emma's answered that one already tonight. I think she's basically said, you know, we do have a proactive schedule. We've admitted it's been maybe a bit too reactive in certain areas, and we're looking to enhance that schedule through our GIS mapping for the highway data we've got. So we admit we need to do more work on it, and we are doing more work on it to get more proactive. And that'll be one of the key things, because what we don't want, of course, we don't want to rely on residents having to contact us to say, well, why haven't you done this? We want to be ahead of the game. We want to be in front of what's going on out there, so people don't have to contact us and feel as if they have to complain. So that's the key piece of work that Emma's doing and Richard's doing with the contractor, and I've got no doubt the data we're going to have as we move into next season will be a lot better than what we've got at the moment, and we can be more on the front foot. And just for your own comfort, if it is I've been heavily involved with conversations with Tivoli, my role as director, and talking to their senior management and their directors in their organisation. I initially left them in no doubt we need to see significant improvement. And what I would say is they have responded very, very well. They've put a lot more resources on the contracts. They've put a lot more equipment on the contract. So I think going forward, we're in a far better place than where we were. So I'm confident as we move into the next cycle next year, we'll be well ahead of the curve. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Shirley, and then we'll go to Phil, and then I've got one. Wait, sorry, Shirley. Alison. I meant to get to Alison first.
I wanted to ask about residents who are helping us. I know particularly, well, I know Woodley, and I'm sure other councillors experience this in their wards, that residents are helping us by, you know, cutting back overhanging WBC-owned trees and bushes, and they're getting out there and sweeping up the leaves that are getting everywhere. Because if they don't do it promptly, you know, it causes issues, and they're just doing it by being neighbourly and community minded, but they're stuck with all that vegetation, not vegetarians. There's just far too much for them to put in their own brown wheelie bins. And I know they've asked, could they be given paper sacks, or what can we do? Because we all appreciate these people who do this. And on a slightly separate note, I do have residents who suffer from WBC trees shedding all over their gardens, and they're quite exasperated that they have to try and get rid of all those leaves. Because I know we're all told, and we all tell our residents, that if your neighbour's tree, you know, the branches are hanging over, you can cut a bit off and just throw it back because they own that. We don't really want our residents throwing back all our leaves onto our property. So what would you advise in these situations?
So I think the first point that you mentioned was related to community-minded individuals, and I think that's something we definitely support, but it's a tricky thing in terms of how we support them in the best way possible. We could potentially leave ourselves open if we offer up brown bags and things like that to residents if we don't necessarily know what they've been doing. And I think it's more likely when we know about larger community events and things like that, we're confident and are in a position to arrange for collection of large amounts of green waste and things like that that might be in our parks or open spaces. But it is a bit trickier when it comes to little bits here and there in terms of when residents cut back. And obviously we want them to be mindful of health and safety aspects, especially if they're working close to the highway, which we'd be wary of ourselves. And I'll just move on to the other point in relation to trees. We don't look after trees within our own team, but it is that when leaves fall, wherever they land, it's not the responsibility of the tree owner to remove the leaves, because obviously we've got our highways and we cleanse them, and that will include leaves from our own trees as well as neighbouring ones. And yes, residents will have a right to cut back to their boundary, and obviously being mindful of any tree protection orders or conservation status of trees. And I think the phrase is they're able to offer up the cuttings rather than lob it over. That's not something we'd encourage. I hope that helps answer.
Well, I don't think that's any comfort or help to any of the residents who've asked me about it, but thank you for your answer.
Okay.
Shirley.
Thank you, Guy. Yeah, I have a quick question about reporting. And I know that quite a few residents use the Fix My Street app for reporting things to the council. So like an overhanging tree or a damaged branch, or, you know, those types of things. And they use that, I think, because it's quicker and easier sometimes than using the council website. And I just wondered if you happen to know whether, if they use that, does that get through to you quite quickly, or is there a sort of a delay? And do people, when they use that, get a response with one of those numbers, like we would if we report on the website? We get a response that tells you your incident number. Would that happen if people were using Fix My Street? And the second part of that is, whilst we're reviewing the way that people can contact the council, is there an app in progress that is a nice simple app where people can report everything, really, like fly tipping, rubbish, overgrown vegetation and so on? Because I think that people would use that a lot more than they perhaps would if it involves going on the website and having to register and enter a password. Sorry, that was a very long-winded question, but thank you.
That's right. I'm happy to pick up the first question in relation to Fix My Street. So any Fix My Street reports that come through, they will go to our customer delivery team, and then from there they will send them on to the relevant team. So it does kind of slow down the process a little bit, and there isn't always that going back to the customer afterwards, because it doesn't integrate with any of the systems that we have. And I'm not sure, but I can take up with IMT if that's something that's any sort of integration expected in the future. But not something that I'm aware of. And on the second point on the app, unfortunately, I don't have any information on that, but I'm sure we can take that away.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Shirley's correct there, because what she's suggesting is effectively the path of least resistance on the application. An app is easier to use in most people's minds. It's a perceptive thing than a website. Phil, you indicated. Oh, you done? Okay. Anne.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, I've got a couple of inquiries out through the Woking Borough website which haven't been responded to, and all I've got is a little code. I've received an email with a little code in it, and I don't know which query is which now. And this isn't really, I don't think this is just the vegetation team at all, but it's just, it would be so nice if the borough website would give more information about queries you've sent, so that you can see what the text was that you sent, so that you don't just get this code that's mean anything.
I think this is a universal problem. Andy, I can see your hand shot up. I think there is a much longer overarching piece of work that is going on in regards to better reporting and better customer experience across the board. Andy.
So yeah, that is something we've looked at in highways terms, and messages that you report highways faults now will automatically from our mapping system pick up the address, and automatically from the report you put in pick up the type of fault you're reporting, and then that will appear in the email that comes to you. So you should have both the code, the road name, and what you've reported as a minimum. The problem comes when you move away from highways, because you need a layer to pick up what the location is. You can't simply, if you report a bit of fly tipping in a field and there's no mapping object to pick up the actual address of that fault, and that's sometimes where you get problems with more general reports. I suspect that might be the case we're talking about here, but I'm not sure.
Yes, thanks. I've reported a street lamp, and I did get a good response from the website, although actually the street lamp isn't working still. But I would have thought that you could design a system where at least the text that you'd submitted could be included in the email that you got sent, because then you would at least know what the query was that the code was talking about. Yeah,
we normally try and keep it. Depends on what text fields you put in. So we normally put in a different text fields, and if you put we often put what's called a free text field in. Yes. People to type as much as within reasonable bounds, to type as much as they want, And the problem with then including that in the message response is you get a massive long title to your email. But you're right, what we do normally do is pick up the actual fault type. And then if you reported overhanging vegetation, it should say the number and overhanging vegetation. But I'd have to look at the specifics to see which ones you've actually reported to give you any more detail on it.
I'm afraid just overhanging vegetation won't do it either, because I submitted 3 queries on the same day about overhanging vegetation, and now I don't know which one's which, you see. So just that isn't.
I think what no. But what you're highlighting, Anne, is the same experience that many residents go through, and that is the challenge we have, is the fact that some of the reporting structure isn't clear. It could be clearer when it's being fed back to us, and it could be a much clearer fed back to residents, because we've got a bit of an insider track as councillors around this table. So I think it's a body of work that goes beyond the team here, as it were, and it's something that needs to be looked at in much more general detail. I think we're gonna move on from this topic, because I've asked my 2 questions, and this is basically that what you've been saying throughout this whole process has been the desire to be proactive and move away from a reactive point to a more proactive model. That is an incredible challenge, but what you've been talking about is data. You need more data to basically get to that proactivity level. So the questions, therefore, are effectively, how much more data, okay, how much more information do you need to get to a level where you feel that you can be proactive for, let's say, 40% of the problem area, the most common problem areas? And then the second part of that is, what do you need from us as councillors and as residents to basically be able to get that data? Those are my questions.
Thank you. I think we'd always encourage residents and members to report as much as they possibly can, because that's where we gather our data from. We have got a large amount of data relating to grounds maintenance at the moment that we can draw upon, as well as historic information of significant cutbacks carried out in the PLAS and problem areas. So we're kind of building a suite of that as we go along, and it will continue to grow as we adopt new areas as well. But I would say if we encourage people to report as much as possible, that allows us to kind of map where the problem areas are. And if something hasn't been picked up in this winter, for example, and comes up in the summer, we can add that on and make sure that we're building a larger system of areas that we can schedule in and do harder work to make sure it pays off in the future.
Okay, thank you. So work in progress, but the more data you have, the better. Okay, right. Well, thank you very much. This was certainly an interesting thing. I have a funny feeling that we will be summoning you back when in the middle of the growing season, to basically view how this process is going and how we can improve it even further. But I think right now the key takeaways that you should take away from this is that please do get that reporting system combined quicker, if possible. And if there is any way to improve feedback to residents through that reporting structure, it needs to be done, because as members here have highlighted, there is still some challenges in feeding that data back. So if we can improve that, then that's a success to begin with from that point of view. So I believe that you two have got aspects to come in the next part of the meeting. So I'm afraid I don't know if you need to attend or not, but we'll be moving on to the next item of the agenda, which is item number 54, which is the MTFP. But Emma, Richard, thank you very much for your feedback on this particular item, and from Andy for giving his contributions throughout. Let's move on to looking like he's coming from us from a dark basement, having just plotted to take over the world. It's Dr. No, but it's actually Graham Ebers.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Chairman. How did you know what was in my mind? Okay, first of all, I'll start by way of orientating us to this session. If you remember, we've had the summary position of revenue and capital. Following that summary position, we have had adult social care and children's services go through, present their budget bids, and obviously receive questions around those. Tonight, we have a rather significant set of bids, which covers place and growth, CIC, and resource and assets, both revenue and capital. What I would like to stress to make this meeting efficient, given the amount of time we had left, I wasn't aware the first item was going to be quite as substantial. So in order to make progress, each lead member, when we come to, will say a very brief introduction to those items, recognizing, not line by line, but just a brief descriptor, so that you can have space for questions, because I think that's where most of the value comes from these meetings. And of course, you've had quite an extensive set of bids to be able to review as well. So I will proceed on this basis, that it will be very brief, light touch intros, and that to allow us to much more quickly move into questions. And can I please ask that when we ask questions around the bids, we use the bid reference number, and this time we put a unique revenue and a unique capital number, so there should only be one. So rather than page numbers, if at all possible, if we could just use bid reference numbers, and obviously the refer to the specific lines that I present through their reference numbers. Is that okay, Chairman?
I've got no objections with that. And for reference on for everyone, if you look at the presentation on page number 40, you will see on column 5, it says bid reference, and it says PG.R1, for example. That's the document that Graham is referring to. Okay. Yep, I've got no objection with that, Graham. So, yeah. Oh, Clive, just quick.
Guy, we've got an awful lot to get through tonight. Do we seriously think that we're going to be able to do it properly?
Well, this is actually the point that we were going to be asking Graham at the end of the meeting, but I think I need to ask it now because we do have the December meeting in reserve. Considering we have gone through a lot tonight so far, the first time took over an hour. We might need to push and have the December meeting in place because that was the original plan, if I remember right, John and Graham, that we had a December meeting in reserve just in case. With that, do we push some items for tonight to go into greater detail?
Can I just say something, Guy? I mean, say this pack's been out now for 7 days, so everybody's had the opportunity to look at it, and I would suggest that their questions are probably really already formed in their mind. And actually going through it line by line is probably not the right way to do this. I think the important thing is that you have had the pack for over a week. You should be able to pick what you want to ask out of that rather than us spoon feeding it to everybody on the table. I'm sure that they would much rather just ask the questions. Now we could do that question by section, which would probably make a bit more sense. But us actually sitting here and presenting it to you, it's, you know, you're not school children and you wouldn't expect us to.
That's a fair enough comment. But one thing I do want to do is we will be going through this in department, as it were, and it will depend on how much questions we have on each department is my point. So we will move forward under that premise in that regard. Clive, did did you have anything else or?
Yeah, I've got loads and loads of questions.
Well, there you are, Clive. We need to go straight into the questions.
And I'm quite happy to go straight to the questions, but I still don't think that we'll get through the whole agenda tonight, because it's not just going to be me asking. I could be asking the questions for an hour and a half, John, or an hour and a quarter, and we've got another.
Yeah, let's just crack on. Let's just crack on, Clive. I will make the call as we go through. I think it's going to be the best option.
Okay. What I was going to suggest, Guy, was that we left community insight and change to the December meeting, and it would be helpful for the people who were on the call waiting for us to get to that section, not to hang around this evening if we're not going to get there, if it's going to be after 10 o'clock or if it's going to be 9:45.
I think we'll see how we get on.
Okay.
And then we will make that call later down the line. So we will go straight to, I believe it's place and growth for starters. Who's taking that one initially? I want a very short introduction and then we can go into it.
Well, we want to go to the questions, Guy. It's all laid out in front of you. You've only got to read it, mate. Sorry about that, but
but Graham said at the start, and this is more for residents' benefit, for those who are watching, about just a high level intro into this specific department.
Okay.
So I believe it's Harry. I believe it's Harry.
Might I suggest Steve does that, because he covers the whole thing.
Can Steve do that, please?
Good idea, Pauline.
I certainly can, Chair. So you're quite right. You've got a number of bids in front of you this evening, and I think going forward, what we will do next time is start to cluster these a bit more together, because effectively you've got arranged them. You've got some around inflation, some around asset growth, some around where there's capacity issues in some of the service because there's demand coming into the system, like in planning. There's the opportunity to look at the biodiversity agenda and how we're growing on that and looking to strengthen our views there. So there's a range of issues. I don't personally think there's anything here that's controversial. For example, you just had a very long, lengthy debate there about what contract management and client is, and Richard and Emma told you about the need for growth within their area to strengthen what we're doing in there. So there's things like administrative functions from concessionary passes, stuff around the local plan. There's nothing here out of the ordinary that I, as a director of the service from a revenue perspective, wouldn't be supportive of, and it's certainly been part of my role since I've been here over the last 6 months, supporting these bids. What I would say as final point is a lot of the bids in front of you are not new. You would have seen them before. They would have come up in last year's cycle, probably as a 22-23 or a 23-24 item. So these would have already been scrutinised. So you should be familiar with them as a scrutiny body. And so my advice would be probably to focus on the newer ones that come forward. But as I say, there are officers on the call. I know the members are on the call. The members are fully briefed and supportive of what's in front of us here. And without further ado, as Councillor Kaiser says, it's probably best to just move straight into those questions so we can pick up any issues you've got.
Thank you. Hands, please. Clive, we can do your first batch first, and then I'll go around.
Before I ask my question on RG1, is we've got 3 new councillors on this committee who would not have been here last year. So won't know what we talked about last year because they were only elected in May of this year. So I don't think this is really the right way for us to be approaching it tonight. But here we go. R1. So this is a question for Pauline. We decided last year that we would expect to get another £500,000 of revenue from car park charges. Can you tell us what the increase in car park charges is going to be? And why isn't it on this bid? Why aren't the details of the car park charges on this bid?
Because car park charges are in fees and charges and they don't get discussed at this point in the year. This optimised parking income revenue was as discussed before, and we have got the recovery of the car parking. We had a supplementary estimate because we didn't make as much money out of car parking as we should have done last year because of COVID, and we're hoping that this will be the recovery of car parking income.
Yeah, but that's not the answer that I'm looking for. I want to know what the level of increases is going to be. You must have been looking at what the increases are going to be, because we had £500,000 put into this medium-term financial plan last year. Now we're putting in another 200,000, and I'm sure you're not just picking out of the air figures. You've actually looked at what you're going to increase the hourly charge for at the moment, which is currently 80p, and what it's going to be for up to 2 hours, 6 hours, whatever. You must have looked at that. So can we have that detail?
No,
and it's also disappointing.
Because it's part of the fees and charges area.
Maybe you let me finish.
Yet. Well, I've told you the answer.
And there isn't any information about benchmarking from other councils. I'm sure that you have looked at benchmarking, but it doesn't appear on these bid details.
Clive, Pauline has said that the fees and charges are not covered at this point in time in this regard. So so Pauline, correct me if I'm wrong, but what PGR1 is referring to is basically talking about management of parking and for effectively different aspects. It's not actually referring to specific fees in this regard, because that is a different section of the budget process.
Guy, I'm sorry to contradict you, but it does say restructuring car parking charges. So that is changing car park charges. That's why I want to know why we're not.
Where are you actually? Because I'm looking, because it says here, in order to recover lost revenue derived from off-street parking operations and enable the effective management of both on-street and off-street park control through CPE, changes to the council's parking operations are proposed, which increases income from parking. Doesn't say anything about charges. It says changes.
It does the line above. Summary of bid for CLT slides. Restructuring of car parking charges.
That is fair enough from that point of view. However, it is still around the management point of view, is my understanding. That is how I interpret it.
Well, I think it's disappointing. They must have actually been looking at what increases they're going to have in car park charges.
Clive,
and I think it's right.
Clive, let Pauline answer.
That will come up with the fees and charges. I would be delighted to hear from the Liberal Democrat group of any suggestions they may have for increasing charges for parking.
This is not an overview and scrutiny committee of the Liberal Democrat group, Pauline. It's an overview and scrutiny of the council.
No. The overview and scrutiny committee is purely around being a critical friend to this council. I will remind all members that we are not playing party politics in this meeting. I'm not listening to a Liberal Democrat Conservative group. I'm not. This is about the overview and scrutiny of this council and this budget process. There is nothing to do with politics in this. If I hear it again, that's it. I will not take any more questions. I am not tolerating that this evening. Okay?
Are you referring to me?
No, I'm just saying it across the board because I've heard it from two points of view. This is across the entire council. Remember that, everyone. We are a critical friend. There is nothing about party politics in this. Okay. Clive, please do continue with your line of questions.
Well, I would just like it to be noted that I am disappointed that we're not being given any detail of any increases in my view, to have come up with these figures of £500,000 for the next financial year, 200,000 for the financial year after that, that there must have been some discussion and thought about what the increase in parking charges would be. And I'm also very disappointed that there isn't any benchmarking from other councils around about us.
Any comment on that? Next question, Pauline?
It wasn't a question.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Do you have anything else, Clive? Well, I was. Okay. Anne?
Okay. Can I just ask, with regard to bid reference PGR1, are there registered risks in case the budgeted income isn't achieved?
Yes, Anne, I think that's a really good question. We've had problems this year. There's a bit of an echo here, isn't it?
Oh, sorry.
To turn off in.
Thanks, thank you, Anne. Yeah, it's a very good question. We've had issues this year because of COVID really denting our parking income. We're seeing it slowly recovering, and it depends who you talk to. The town centre team are saying that footfall is back to normal, but we're not seeing that in the car parking. So there's always a risk that we undershoot on this target. The other thing to bear in mind is now the Denmark Street car park is bigger than it was, so we will get some extra revenue from that, which will compensate as well. So you're right, it's extremely difficult to forecast parking revenue. We've put what we had in the budget in there, and if we don't manage to make that, we will have to come back with a supplementary estimate, and John Kaiser is very well aware of that.
Thanks very much. Where would I find the council's set of registered risks?
I think you'll find it in the audit committee usually.
In the what committee?
Yes, and it's the audit committee that holds the corporate risk register, which is the highest level of risks from across the borough council, which is basically fed into by each of the individual directorates. Each of the individual directorates then has their own department risk register, as it were, which sits underneath them, and then it gets subservient going all the way down.
But I think, Anne, you're absolutely right, and we're very aware of the fact that parking income is extremely difficult to forecast at the moment.
Graham, and then we'll go to Alison quickly.
Yes, sorry. Just to add to the point about round risks, our general fund balance is informed by a fairly comprehensive risk analysis. So when we set the budget, we also go through to assess high level and medium level risk, and that's a key informant of our general fund balance position, which we know is traditionally safe.
Thank you.
Alison.
Thank you, Chairman. Pauline, could you just give us the time frame for the parking revenue recovery plan, which we're told is being developed, has not been completed yet, and would we have an opportunity to scrutinise that when it's ready?
Rather than stitch Andy up, Alison, I'll ask Andy to answer that one.
Do you mean overview and scrutiny, or as individual members?
Well, when I say we, I mean the cross-party overview and scrutiny committees.
I don't see any problem with it. It's a wider thing, a piece of work, and it's still in preparation. So I couldn't give you a date at the moment, but yes, I don't see any problem with it.
I assume you've got an ambition. You must have a plan that you're working to, a target when you're hoping to have completed it.
It's around. I'm hoping to have completed it in mid next year.
Thank you.
Keep us in the loop, Andy.
Will do.
Thank you, Andy.
Okay. No No one else. So, yeah.
Just have one more question, please, Guy.
Yep.
I'd just like a clear answer. Have we looked at increasing car park charges? Is that an option for us to achieve these £700,000 savings?
As I've said before, that will be done under fees and charges, but anything is an option for us to meet these savings or these revenue targets.
Okay. And were you asking about this one or?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, I've got a question. I think it's the same section, but it's not the same bid.
Okay, I think we're going to be going through everything line by line at this rate. So,
Shall I shut up?
which one is it? It has. Oh, it hasn't got one more.
Well, okay, it's below PG.R20.
Oh, we'll be there in a while.
So, okay.
Yep. Sorry. You've got one. Okay. I believe we're going through to number 3 now. Paul, well, it's not. I think it's underneath the value. So,
thank you, Chair. The additional civil parking enforcement, will the additional resource of 4 CPE officers remain only on street to tackle the road safety issues? And how has the income been assessed? Thank you.
The CPE, as you know, somebody's got their microphone on again. The CPE, as you know, Paul, is cost neutral. We generally raise enough money from CPE to pay for the CPE enforcement, and it's ring fenced so that we can't spend the money on non-CPE areas. The CPE officers already enforce parking off the street. They certainly have helped in the past with some of our car parks, and they've certainly been active in the multi-stories when we've had antisocial behaviour as well. So I think probably the answer to your question is no, they won't be ring fenced because they're not ring fenced at the moment. However, we're hoping that the extra resource will give us the opportunity to target more CPE resources on areas that councillors and indeed the residents raise, particularly things like school parking.
So I didn't quite understand your response to how you're going to generate that income. How has that been assessed?
It's assessed based. Sorry, Paul, I was a bit too fast. It's assessed based on the current revenue that the current parking enforcement people raise. I mean, the current number of car parking enforcement people are cost neutral. We can't enforce everything that the residents ask us to because we don't have enough parking enforcement people. If we enforce more parking, we will have, in line with that, more revenue. But as I said before, to reiterate, this isn't a profit making or a revenue generating scheme. This is in order to enforce issues that residents raise with us to do with parking, antisocial behaviour in car parks and school parking.
Shirley.
Thank you, Guy. I've got a question about the next one down, which is PGR4, income from park and ride sites. I just wondered, does that income include some sort of predicted income from the Thames Valley Park and Ride, where currently there's no parking or no riding? And on the same sort of topic, but moving on, I note that there's a transport corridor improvements, Shepherd's Hill to Thames Valley Park and Ride, 950,000. And I'm kind of wondering, if we don't get the park and ride up and running with buses, will that also not go ahead?
I think, Shirley, to go to the capital bid first, I think that was one that was in last year's budget. So that hasn't got a bid sheet for it. I'm not quite sure why they're in here, actually. But as far as the park and ride is concerned, we're actually about to use the Thames Valley Park and Ride for the Winnersh Park and Ride overflow would be the best phrase for it, because with the Winnersh Park and Ride extension being built, the that we won't be able to run the buses to there, so we're going to start running them to Thames Valley Park. We're looking, at the moment, the park and rides are cost neutral. They don't make money, but we're looking to see whether we can use the parks and rides as they get commissioned to do more adventurous things. And some of that's been mentioned in the BSIP to for instance, running a chained bus between the various park and rides, and also potentially running something to Twyford. So we're looking at opportunities to improve the park and ride usage and the park and ride network by doing some more interesting things with buses. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Clive, I presume it was PGR 3 you wanted to go back to.
Sorry, we are looking at getting another £241,000, which I think if a parking ticket is 40 quid, that's about 6,000 extra tickets. If these extra enforcement officers are spending most of their time around schools, which I think is what you said a couple of times, Pauline, then they're not going to get an extra 6,000 tickets.
I didn't say that, Clive. What I said was that they would be, you've got your microphone. What I said was they would be enforcing based on requirements generated by residents and councillors and their normal tasking of things that they know are a problem, as well as dealing with schools. This will give us more opportunity, and the same as the current ones do. They spend part of their time enforcing schools. I've certainly had them out in your ward helping to enforce parking issues at Hawkton School, where people were parking on one of the residential roads on the double yellow line, for example. They will do that sort of stuff to deal with safety problems for schools. That actually does generate income because they were getting tickets for parking on a double yellow line. But the fact remains that every parking enforcement officer does a proportion of schools as well as everything else. So if you increase the proportion of the number of parking officers, the amount of income should be linear.
Okay, so they're not actually going to be really concentrating on schools. It's going to be everywhere.
Sorry, Clive, would you stop putting words into my mouth? That's not what I said. What I said was, as we increase the number of parking enforcement officers, we will have more people that are able to work in schools or on school parking problems as well as other problems.
I think what Clive is complaining about here is the concept of the English language in PGR 3 in the description. I think there should be a comma in there somewhere, which completely changes the terms of the sentence. Because actively addresses issues by residents, particularly around schools, and ensures the service. I think there's supposed to be a comma at residents at the end of residents, as that gives an explanation about a highlighted issue.
I'm not responsible for the punctuation in the bids.
Yeah, I know. I think that is where the issue, where Clive's issue resides down from. It is a grammatical thing.
And also, when we have discussed civil parking enforcement before on this committee, there has been an indication that, or a feeling from some of the members on the committee, this is last year and the year before, that some areas such as Dinton Pastures and Wokingham Town Centre were actually being targeted. And there was a denial of that by the civil parking enforcement people. But I think that's probably what is going to happen if we're going to be getting an extra 241,000.
I'm getting increasingly annoyed with you making stuff up and essentially saying...
Pauline, I'm going to stop you there. Steve, you've indicated you want to explain this.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just want to step in. I mean, I've discussed this with Andy and I've gone through it with him, and I can assure you that his enforcement officers are deployed in areas to meet community requests. That's how we respond, that's how we schedule their work. So we task them, and we task them in accordance with what our local communities ask us to do. And that's primarily around safety incidents, and that's what we do. So just for clarity on that, because I'm well aware, I know parking enforcement can be contentious. So I just think it was important to clarify that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Considering I had a resident harangue me about them a few days ago after seeing me walk my daughter to school, that is, if some hate them, some love them. That's besides the point. PGR4, I know we started some questions. Did anyone else have any more questions on that? Sam.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question was regarding PG3. The figures here, PGR3, sorry, not, the figures here are 241,000 per annum for civil parking enforcement revenue. Does this take into, what do the forecasts say in terms of the effect of this, the changing nature of work and everyone working from home? If you look at prior to this year, prior to COVID, everyone's in the office 5 days a week. People are rushing to meetings, parking their cars illegally. People are parking illegally, jumping on a train to London, vice versa. Do you see, could this changing work pattern affect this forecast, or have you seen a change prior to this 2022 year as well?
Steve?
Yeah, I can pick that up.
And Andy in a minute.
That's Andy's got his hand up. So Andy's probably going to say what I'm going to say. All the data we've up to date is that the income we projected for next year and the intelligence we've got is parking income is going to recover. And that's what we're forecasting going ahead on what it is. So Andy, I don't know if you want to add to that.
No, I was going to say exactly that, Steve, which is current. This is a current forecast. A bit like the parking income, it's very difficult to predict actual levels and changes in work patterns and that impact, but it's our best estimate at the moment, and it's done by the contractor who we actually subcontract the service to, so they have been fed into this income projection. So
I think the other thing to add is that people have been working from home for the last year, and these forecasts are based on that change of reality. So I think there is some of that already built in that the forecasts are based on the revenue to date.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Thank you. Paul.
Thank you, Guy. Back to the park and ride sites are 4. What is the additional forecast income for each of the park and ride sites?
That's certainly far too detailed for me. If Andy's got that data, then I'm sure he'll share it. Otherwise, we'll give you a written answer.
I don't have that information to hand, Paul. I think we've taken, we've looked at that. We've taken what we think is a robust estimate of what the income might be looking at a recovery. However, as Pauline said, we're already undertaking a study to look at our pricing structure in park and rides and how we fund the bus services that make those viable. So there's a bit of uncertainty about the actual prediction at the moment, but we will be looking at it. We currently think that the park and ride should be cost neutral, so that we balance that incentive against the income. But I can't really give any more detail than that at the moment on the actual income.
So how have you predicted 200,000, 300,000, 400,000? There must be a breakdown underneath that against each of the park and rides, surely.
There is a rough breakdown, and if you want to come back to me after this, I'm happy to share it with you.
I was about to ask for us to get an email detailing that, because I'm interested in as well.
Yeah, we'll happily give you a written answer, Guy. It's just a bit detailed for this meeting.
Yeah, that's fine. Because I mean, from personal observation, when I've made trips in and out via Winners Triangle Station before the construction work started, it was approaching about 70 to 80% of what I experienced pre-pandemic. When I was parking there at the times in the morning. So it looks like that was beginning to recover. Right now, it's completely full because it's 80% of it's closed. So it'll be interesting to see those numbers. Thank you. We'll move on to number 5 now, PG5. Oh, have we still got more on 4 or is this 5?
Yeah.
4, 5, go ahead.
Thank you, Guy. If we look at 1 and 4 together, there's an extra 1.1 million of income that we're expecting from car park charges over the next 3 years. So I just want to know from somebody whether they think that that is actually achievable, because it is, an awful lot of money. And it's our job as overview and scrutiny to be making sure that the plans that you're putting before us to say that you are going to get an extra £1.1 million worth of income are robust.
Steve, Andy, I can see you've appeared.
Yep, thank you, Chair. So as I mentioned earlier on, our parking income has near enough recovered already if you look at it on a month-by-month basis. So there's this perception that no one's going out. Well, I try and go into Woking Town Centre, I can't get a car parking space in the town centre. It's the same where I live as well. So income is recovering. People are moving about. We're not in a lockdown situation. I appreciate there's changing in work habits and those sorts of things. But primarily, if you look at our town centre income, it's doing extremely well. So we'd be confident based on that. From a crystal ball point of view of where we are with the pandemic going forward, it's not a person on the planet that can answer that one. So we work on what we know today. So that would certainly be that one. And you'll notice in relation to the income from Park and Ride, there is also an associated cost, isn't there, Andy, with maintenance as well. So one does net off against the other. I'm trying to find the PG number off the top of my head. There's so many.
That was going to be my point, Steve, which is...
I'm sure it's going to be, Andy, I'm sure we're on the same page. So, but I can assure you there is an associated maintenance cost of those new assets as well, and the maintenance of those. So income, so the way this is presented is there's an income sheet, but then you'll get an associated cost sheet, exactly the same for the parking enforcement income. We've got to pay for the 4 new enforcement officers, and of course they generate an element of income, and then there's a netting off of that effect. So just for clarity, Chair.
And I'd add to that, Steve, that you got to remember, Clive, that what we're actually talking about is opening effectively 3 new park and rides. That's the council and the LEP have invested in 3 new park and rides in the borough, and that's why the income's gone up for park and rides.
And one of our car parks is about twice the size it was last year as well, which means it's ahead of budget.
You indicated again, Clive, if you wanted to ask that.
Yep, I appreciate your point, Steve, that car parking has recovered. So that actually makes it even more difficult to get the 1.1 million. But I think we've probably pushed this as far as we're going to go.
That's not actually correct, because last year's revenue included a point where for most of the year car parking hadn't recovered. So it's a cumulative year figure, not a point figure.
Thank you, Pauline. I think that's something we always need to remember is that this is cumulative. Okay, I think Pauline can take a break now, so we move on to some grass bins.
Thank you.
So if we look at PGO 5 and 6 together, basically around the waste collection services, Shirley, then Paul, and then Sam.
Thank you, Guy. Last year when we discussed the increase in the garden waste subscription, we talked a lot about whether or not we could make that available. It could be available to more residents by charging people monthly, because 70 is going up to £70 now. But it's quite a lot of money for someone who's on a low income, and we want to increase our rate of recycling. And we definitely discussed that at the last time, and I wondered if anything had happened as a result.
Yeah, Shirley is correct on that. We definitely discussed it last time. Has any progress been made on that?
Shirley, thank you for that. The green waste, the demand for the bins has gone up incredibly well, and we're trying to meet that demand. And in fact, the demand is so insatiable, whether people are responding to the COVID crisis or what, spending more time in the gardens, and but the demand for the brown bins has dramatically increased. Richard might be able to add a bit more to that.
Yeah, I get that. If the demand has increased, it could well be that there are a lot of people out there who would really like a bin, but think, well, I haven't got £70 to spend all at once. That's all. And I think we should be making it easier for people on low incomes to recycle if they can and they want to.
If you look at the borough demographics, the distribution of people across the borough come from all sorts of backgrounds. So people from low incomes to high incomes to middle of the range incomes. It's distributed across the borough, Shelby. I can't see a problem at all at the moment based on the demand that we are facing. Richard, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, thank you for that, Shirley. The other point around this is also access to other disposal points. So the HWRC's Longshot Lane and also at Reading. So that the residents have those two opportunities to take those back. But certainly, monthly, I wasn't aware in terms of the previous conversations that happened, but we could take that back and have a look at that a little bit further.
Thank you, Richard. I think it's worthwhile looking at because some residents do struggle, especially those on fixed incomes, to the less said about my boiler problems, the better at this point in time. But sudden unexpected expenses are a concern. So maybe this is also being looked at, Graham. Is there services that this council that we can offer that can basically be tagged onto the council tax, as it were, as basically a monthly recurring fee, because it's then all bundled up into a oh God, I'm taking the cable TV Netflix approach of bundling all our services together into one easy monthly payment approach. So maybe that is a task for Graham and his team to look at from that point of view, because that's the path of least resistance I see it from, Shirley. As Graham stares daggers at me from across the room, more likely. Here he comes.
But by all means, I can look into it again, but I'm pretty sure you can't play around with a council tax bill. It's governed under quite tight legislation in terms of how we bill, what the bill says, and of course the whole IT infrastructure behind it is nationally determined. Obviously, major suppliers provide the same software across many sites across the country. So I'll look into it, but it might sound convenient, but I don't think it works well in the terms of the legislation and the mass production and the commonality across the country in terms of how council tax is administered. But I'll look into it again.
I'm kind of hijacking Shirley's point here, but you're right, it does sound convenient, but I think it's a question that needs to be asked because we're not in the 20th century anymore. We're in the 21st. I think we need to move with the times in some regards. So maybe we start at a much bigger point. And Alison, yes.
Graham, can people simply not pay by direct debit over 12 months rather than one lump sum for their £70 wheelie bin? Because I think Shirley's point was that for a lot of people, £70 out of 1 month's income is a struggle, whereas if it was split over the year, they could manage it very easily. I mean, goes for me as much as many of my residents.
Well, a number of charges are paid by direct debit over a staggered period. I don't know if there are any issues around this. This is more of a service issue if someone knows the answer to that, but there is the capabilities to do that for some of the council services, and of course our council tax is collected in that way. Does anyone know the answer to that? And we can go and look at it.
I'll let Phil come in and then, but definitely we need to look at this.
Sorry, Chair, I didn't mean to be jumping up and down.
No, sorry.
But actually, I just see us walking into some form of nightmare of recovering direct debits which have been bounced because someone can't afford them on one particular month, and then do you go and collect their bin after how many payments have been missed? I mean, the way that I see it, and what my mum does, because she can't afford to get a bin, is that she gets the bags as she goes along. So I think I don't want to spend too much time on this, but that's my suggestion, that it's just too much to collect it monthly on a direct debit.
Let's just take a look into it. There's got to be ways to support those on fixed incomes in this regard. There's got to be some method, even if it's quarterly or something like that. We'll see what we just look into it, Graham, please. Shirley,
I was just going to add that, yeah, the reason I mentioned it was because we did, when last year somebody said, oh yeah, we'll go away and look at that. And if someone had come back and said, yeah, we've looked at it and it's not going to work because of A, B and C, absolutely fine. But it doesn't look as if anyone's looked at it. That's the point.
Yeah, I agree. You're exactly right. But I think we've pretty much repeated the conversation exactly from last year, but that's beside the point. Paul and then Sam.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to raise a similar thing about the recurring charges, let's call it, rather than monthly, if we could get the service to look at that. The other point I was going to make was we've had some delays this year because of COVID and lack of HGV drivers. So when will these new charges start? And secondly, because of the potential or the delay, have those new charges been taken into account in the forecast figures?
Thank you, Paul. I think that for new customers, the charges will start normally at the beginning of April, but because of the delay, we have added 2 months onto the existing contract, so the existing customers will get their bills 2 months later.
So just to clarify, new customers will start with April, and existing customers will start from the 1st of June with the new payments.
Can I clarify, Parry? Can I help?
Yeah, sure.
Right. So Paul, so yes, if you're a new customer, it will start from April, but obviously we delayed the service by 4 weeks. And so obviously that allowance, because we don't want people to miss out, obviously would allow that 4 week on the old rate and the service to move forward. So effectively, whatever the impact has been for people in year, because we've had to suspend that service as we know we didn't want to for that 4 week period, that would be allowed onto the new anniversary date of when the new charges come in. So if it's 4 weeks, it'll be 4 weeks, or if it's 6 weeks, it's 6 weeks. So just for clarity, it depends on the level of delay, Paul.
Sam.
Thank you, Chair. Have the local authority ever thought about maybe giving people a small discount or something for if they want a second bin or something, just sort of as an additional revenue stream? If someone's thinking I want 2-3 bins, for example, I've got, for people that've got extra large garden, or even people who are just really keen gardeners, is that something they've thought about or ever discussed?
I can't answer that one specifically for Wokingham Council. Richard, have we looked at, because I think we do offer second bins, don't we, to residents?
Yeah, we offer second bins at the same price, and that's potentially something else we could look into, but obviously that will impact on budgetary figures that we've put in front of you today. So that will need to take into account.
Yeah. And I think the other thing to add is obviously there is a cost for collection and treatment and disposal. So obviously we obviously pay Veolia for the service, we have to pay for the bins, we pay for the collection, and we pay for the disposal. So if members want to consider subsidising services, that's a different conversation on concessions, but obviously that's not being proposed here. And what I would say is the cost at £70 is one that is quite benchmarkable across the area as well. and one we believe is fair in relation to the service that's provided.
Yeah, no, I just think it could be quite a nice idea if someone, if someone's a keen gardener, or if you see it on Facebook or Twitter or something, you say, oh, would you like we're offering second bins for people who are keen gardeners, or even if it's a £5 discount or something. I think we'd be surprised at how many people might think, oh, actually, that'd be useful, because even if you haven't got an overly huge garden, just the odd month where you've thought, oh, I just haven't got enough space in my bin, even that small inconvenience can be quite annoying. So just an idea to put out there. So I think you get quite a lot of people that would take that up.
We'll take that away, Councillor. Thank you very much.
Clive?
Thank you, Guy. I'm glad you mentioned benchmarking, Steve. You've benchmarked Hart Council, which is at £81, but I'm not sure, or I don't know, how much Reading, Bracknell, Windsor and Maidenhead, West Berkshire charge, which would be authorities similar to us. Some of them might not have brown bins. I don't know that either, but do you know any comparisons with any of those authorities?
Yeah, thanks, Clive. Yeah, we've done a bit of local benchmarking, and certainly across border as well, and that's where Hart came in terms of their £81. I think it's also looking at the services that we operate as compared to Bracknell and Reading and what they charge, which is slightly less than us, but they've got less numbers in terms of vehicles going out and operating costs as well.
Do you know how much less?
I don't off the top of my head, unfortunately, Clive. I can get back to you on that one.
All right.
Okay, I've just got one quick one on PG6, which is basically the low performing areas have identified using, what are the low performing areas? Are they specific regions of the borough? Are they towns, parishes and whatnot? And also just one quick comment. There's a spelling mistake on PG5, and I know that we're councillors and id is an important part of psychology, but I believe it's meant to be is, but that's just been bugging me this entire time. I've been staring at it. So what is the areas that need improvement in on PG6, the areas? Is it localities, or is it, what's the detail?
Is that in relation to food waste?
Yes, PG6, food waste.
Okay, sure. Richard, can you pick that one up?
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Guy. The areas you're referring to is in regards to particular streets, particular neighbourhoods, etc., which don't participate as much as other streets in the scheme. We're around about 50-60% participation. We need that high as possible. So we've already undertaken some work mapping out those areas which aren't participating and targeting those through a bit of door knocking, and also sending out letters and communications with them to get them involved and get them recycling their food waste as much as possible. Hopefully that answers your question.
It does, thank you very much. Shirley, apologies, I did see you indicate and then it slipped my mind.
Thank you. No, mine was also on that subject, and I notice it says that there is going to be a comms engagement campaign, which you've just illustrated, but I just wondered, I didn't see any cost anywhere for that, looking through the cost. So I just wondered, how much are you likely to be spending? Have you got a budget figure in mind for spending on engagement and comms regarding this?
Thank you for that. It's an interesting point. The good news is we're going to get some free support from RAP, who are the Waste and Resources Action Programme. So they're going to help us do a communications campaign. There will be some small costs in regards to getting that communications campaign up and running, in particular literature and also door knocking, and envisaged what will happen, and it will be in a kind of invest to save. So for every tonne that we avoid going to the energy from waste plant or landfill, etc., that will be costed against the actual campaign that we'll undertake. Is that Is that sufficient for you?
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to keep moving forward. What I'm going to do now is, oh, what, Clive?
Yes, sorry, Guy. This is PG6. Richard, Stephen, can you just confirm that you really think we can get this extra £350,000 next year and then be able to do the same the year after and the year after?
Well, it's...
Yes, and I'll tell you why. Because currently, all that needs to happen is our residents need to not put their food waste in their blue sack and put it in their kitchen caddy. At the moment, that is literally £1 million a year that we are wasting, because what goes in the blue sack costs us an awful lot more than just putting it in a different receptacle, because there's a different gate fee. And we need to communicate that to our residents, because they are literally wasting £1 million of their council tax money every single year. So I think if we get that message across, if we can get a third or 40% of the population to just do a bit more of using that caddy bin, that's more money we can, or you as members can choose to invest in the things that are important for your residents. So a simple answer, yes, Clive.
I'd also just like to add to that as well, Clive, if possible, around the comms campaign. Absolutely food waste. We 24% of our rubbish in the blue bag is composed of food waste. We've got another 30% that are dry recyclables. So that's your paper, your cardboard, your plastic bottles, etc. That's being thrown away. And we're going to focus on that really, really hard to get everything as much as we possibly can out of the blue bags and into more recyclable means, including the items that can go to the HMRCs as well as glass.
Those are really good answers, and if you can communicate to our residents through your comms campaign that they could save £1 million, which is one heck of a lot of money, then you'll be doing really well if you can pull that off. So I hope you can.
And the figures are cumulative, so if there's then further improvements in year 2 and 3, it becomes, let's say, £500,000 instead of 350,000. Shirley, just quickly.
Just quickly, yeah. I just wondered if you'd considered perhaps putting out some of the comms in alternative languages. I know that I've got some neighbours who, for whom English is not the first language, and they seem to be in quite a muddle with what goes in which recycling bag. And I have had a word with them, but I still don't think that they've grasped it. And I just wonder whether that's part of the exercise, maybe looking at.
That's a very, very good point.
I think that's also around equalities and accessibility to our services. So we've got to be absolutely on that. And that's a really key, interesting point that you've made. So as part of the RAP funding or support they're going to give us, we're going to look into that a little bit more detail. What residents have we got, what makeup, what languages, and then we can put that in place. I'm actually, my previous job is from Woking Borough Council, and there's quite a high population in there of different languages, and we had some leaflets, etc., in different languages, and that worked really well.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Shirley. Right, we're going to move swiftly on. I'm going to ask that people ask questions on PGR 7, 8, 9, 10 and 11 now. So it's all Pauline, so that we can move through things a little faster. So if you've got questions on that, Paul goes first. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Paul.
Yeah, just R10. Similar question to my income one from the park and ride operating costs. Have you got that broken down for each site, please?
Same answer, Paul.
Yeah, I thought it would be. Yeah, I'll refer to Andy.
Thank you. Anyone else on these ones? Silence. Okay, in that case then we're going to go on to 12 and 13 for Wayne.
Sorry, Guy.
What? I did say
yeah,
there was anything else.
I know, and I was slow to react Well, I just wanted to say that I think it is really good that we're getting these extra posts in R9. So I am making this point because I don't want it to be thought that all we do is sit here and criticise. We don't.
Good. Very glad to hear you're supporting us.
Yeah, Guy, I would fully support that one as well in the traffic management team. It's definitely the right thing to do.
Well, that's good to hear. Wayne, wakey, 12 and 13 are you?
Well, is there any questions?
Yeah, I was about to say, any questions?
Just trying to move you along a bit.
Sorry.
Alison?
Could I just say that 13 is the most ridiculously small font I've ever seen in a council document. This isn't really for you, Wayne, it's for the officers that presented this, but why there's like acres of space either side and then it's squished into tiny writing in the middle, I don't know. But I don't think anyone could read this.
Point taken, Alison. Officers, I hope you're listening.
I think that's the first criticism of Graham's templates we've heard this year, but it's a valid point. It's a valid point. Yeah, I don't know. It's probably a formatting thing. Anyway, with no more questions, we will go on to Clive.
Yep.
Be quicker.
R12. So we're going to spend an extra 59,000. But when I was looking at the supporting evidence and adding up the costs of these different officers that we're going to take on, it comes to 128,000. Have I missed something?
Wayne, I can pick that up.
All right, sorry.
Yeah, you okay?
Occasion, yeah, sorry.
Go ahead. No, it's just, Clive, thanks for raising it. So PGR 12, can you also reference it's PGR 27?
Yeah.
So you've got, so sorry about the confusion there. So effectively PGR 12 is the business support manager, although it lists the other two staff, but the other two staff are funded in PGR 27. So apologies for the confusion, and you're right to pick it up.
Which is 69,000.
Yeah.
59, Clive.
Yeah. If we have these sorts of things going forward, can officers basically put a note or something in the additional comments page going also part of PGR or whatever, just so we have clarity in the future? Minor thing, but it'll help us in speed. Clive, one more?
Yeah, one more. R13, we're going to look at increasing the salary for graduates. Hillingdon are paying 32,000 to 34,000. What is Wokingham going to be?
What, for graduates, Clive?
Yes, Wayne, yeah.
I don't know specifically to graduates. Do you know that, Marcia? Or do you know? Sorry, Steve.
No, I don't. I was just actually going to ask Marcia to come in on that one because she'd have the detail of her staff and because she would have done all this work. So,
what I would say, Clive, is we've lost 12 people from the planning team, and as I don't need to tell you how hot the planning jobs are in our area, and with this regrading of the staff was in almost to bring them up the level of the what do you call it, the scale that they use in local authorities to try and encourage them not to leave, because we are suffering across the whole board.
Yeah, I'm sure we are, Wayne. So it is good that we are trying to do something about it, but I'm just trying to find out how close we're getting to competitors like Hillingdon, which is really not that far away.
No, you're absolutely right.
So
Marcia.
It would just be nice to know. If Marcia hasn't got it to hand, she can tell us at another date.
Yeah, I'm sure she has.
Our graduate planners start on grade 6, which is starting around 25,000, but our junior planners are on a career grade, so we can move them from the starting salary of 25,000 all the way through to the top of grade 7, which is 32,910. So in terms of staff recruitment, we can move them up through that career grade without them having to apply for another job. And I closely monitor what other local authorities pay their officers. And it may be that next year I'm coming back with a bid to increase that career grade up to grade 8, because we spend a lot of time and effort training our graduates. We don't want them to walk away when they hit the ceiling. So I'm definitely on the case with how much we pay our staff.
Yeah, I think that's good that they can get up to 32,000, but I'm sure you're going to expect them to have several months or even a couple of years experience before they get to that figure, and then they're only just getting to where London Borough of Hillingdon is. So.
I think this is where we need to, and I'm certain Marcia's doing this, is basically examining the impact of the London weighting. And I think that is a piece of work that might need to be taken going forward, is how will Crossrail and the flight to the suburbs, as it were, from London since the pandemic is affecting wages in the area. But that is a greater piece of work that I think needs to be done in the future. But at least Marcia is ahead of it, and it looks like keeping an eye on things.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for that, guys.
Okay, moving. Oh, Sam, apologies.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question is in regards to PGR 12, page 73. If we look at the third paragraph under description of bids, it says bid for 2 additional, there's some additional recruitment going on due to the increased demand. I think it says 53% in the first 5 months of this year over the same period in 2020. What do the forecasts show, for this increase? Do we think it's going to keep rising for this planning, and will this lead to an increased staffing costs over the following year and the year ahead, or do we see a sort of a demand cooling a little?
I mean, Sam, we haven't seen. We were surprised, very surprised last year, in terms of our planning applications and pre-planning and planning and commercial planning. We've seen no letdown this year. In actual fact, we've seen an upturn this year compared to last year. I mean, we are in a hothouse of where we've got a mixture of things going on. We do live in quite a wealthy area, and in contrast to some areas, we're much higher than a lot of our neighbours. So I'm probably answering your question, Marcia, but from my perspective, I don't see a cooling down coming anytime soon. I see the reverse of that. And it's everything from one-off houses to householder applications to some of the big stuff we're seeing that will come through. Don't forget, there's been a letdown in a lot of the appeals over the last sort of 18 months. They will start to come forward again. Bigger applications will start to come forward again. So I think at the moment, everything is going up. I don't see any downturn.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that, Wayne. I think you've only got to look at the price of wood to see that, clearly the demand's going through the roof.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you go and ask builders when can they do a job for you, and some of them are looking at 2023 already.
Deep breath, guy. Deep breath. Okay, thank you for that, Wayne. I'm going to move on now to Parry, PGR 14, 15, 16, 17, and 8. No, 18's John. Does anyone have any questions on those particular items? Okay, no. So I'm going to go to 18, which is John, and also for the temporary accommodation point as well, which is PG 19, as they're both connected to John. Anyone got any questions on them? Nope. Okay, and then, sorry? Well, it was PG 18 and 19, which is John Kaiser's ones. Alison.
I don't really understand what the £77,000 is for in R19. Doesn't seem to describe what the money's needed for.
Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Alison. It's 1.5 FTE to help deliver the Community Safety Partnership Action Plan. So it's 1.5 FTE.
So it's to employ an officer.
It is, yes.
Which line on the page details that?
I don't think it does. So you raised the point of clarity there, and make sure it's made clearer in the report going forward. But it is 1.5 FTE.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Clive. Was there anything else? And we'll come to you next.
PG 20.
We hadn't quite got to that one.
Oh, wasn't
yet. Sorry. Anne.
Yes, sorry, I was just going to ask simply, what does the community safety strategy consider?
The community safety partnership sets a number of priorities, Councillor. So it's recently been published here. We'll look at a number of things like ASB. Found out about the community safety partnership last week, so there's a lot of synergy with us and the police. We look obviously at incidents of domestic violence, which is there's a report going to the executive in December on that. We will look at violent crime and those things. We look at burglaries and whatever's really on the horizon. The key thing at the moment, though, the big topic that's coming through CSP is ASB, because it's coming through loud and locally, not just in our domain. Because you'll be well aware, we're obviously looking at the PPP divorce and us creating our own enforcement and safety team from April next year, which will focus heavily on ASB. And also, we know, as Councillor Stone mentioned earlier on, about the new borough commander we have in place, and the police confirming that their priorities and the police crime and commissioner's office, the ASB is a key one for them as well. But domestic violence is also a key one, as I mentioned earlier. Very, very topical. Absolutely right that we focus on this heavily. And I know the officers we've got within the community safety team and the members involved are working heavily with this, with our colleagues and other agencies, to make sure we do all we can to support victims of domestic abuse and violence, and obviously deal with the perpetrators. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Number 20, which is Bill. I know you had a question on that, Clive.
Yep, thank you. The RAG status is red. So can you've made a guess that we're going to need to spend an extra £350,000. Well, I guess it could be another 100,000 on top of that, or even 150. But your best guess is 350.
John, would you like me to pick that one up in TA in housing? I'm quite happy to do that, Chair. So
yeah, I think go for it.
That's fine. So it is based on our information we've got. We have seen an increase in those in temporary accommodation, but we're not just sitting there watching it. We are doing a lot of mitigation. We're doing a lot of upfront prevention of work. We've got no reason to think demand's not going to increase. It's increasing elsewhere. And
yeah, can I just, Steve, can I cut this short and just say we've seen 100% increase in homelessness in the borough, and this is our response to that, Clive.
I'm not being critical of your response at all, John. I just want to make sure that you've got the RAG status of red, which says low certainty on figures and project delivery. So what I'm actually doing is questioning whether 350,000 is enough.
Well, the only thing, yeah, I would just say to you, Clive, we've got a couple of bits and pieces going on at the moment. One of them relates to some homeless accommodation we're building in Groveland, which will give us 24 units. And we've also got a deal that we haven't brought to executive yet, but we've been talking to a provider who can provide us with 32 rooms at a discounted rate over a period of years. And so I would suggest that we are doing things to stem the flow. That said, Clive, I fully agree with you. Coming out of COVID, it's very difficult for us to decide on where we are. But of course, with all these budget numbers, we are in a position, and I say to all officers, they are in a position that they can actually put in a supplementary budget if it's necessary. It requires a paper. That paper would actually have to go to the executive to justify. But we have made a commitment to keep the homeless off the street of this borough. We're working with Two Saints to do it, and I think it's really important that we as councillors all sign up to that. And I thank you for your support there, Clive.
Yeah, we do all agree with you with that commitment, John.
Excellent. There goes my question on that one. Okay, so going over the page. Going back to Pauline with PGR 21 and 22. Which, anyone got any questions on them? Clive?
Very simple question on R22. Get a bus pass.
I didn't hear most of that question, Clive. Your microphone was off.
What age do you have to be to get a bus pass?
Do you need to declare an interest?
No. I hope not.
I think it depends on what sort of bus pass, but generally it's pension age. So whatever age you get to claim your state pension, then you get a bus pass. I think there's probably other bus passes for disabled people and things, but this has got nothing to do with the bus passes themselves. This is to do with renewing the issue of them.
Anne, quickly.
Okay, thank you. It's about R21. I see that this strategy is being set out for the next 15 years. So that's quite a long time. What happens if there's a significant change in circumstances during that time? Is it possible to update the plan?
So, can you switch your microphone off?
Oh, sorry. Okay.
It's all right. I just don't like the echo. Yeah, this is actually a reprofiling of something that was budgeted last year. And the reason for the reprofiling into this year is because the local plan update isn't finished, and this needs to match the open local plan update. So they're all kept in line. So I presume if the local plan update gets updated, then this will get updated as well. I don't think it's set in stone, but maybe Wayne could answer that better than me.
Steve?
Am I right, Steve?
Yeah. So local plans, so over a 15-year period, this runs in tandem with that. Best practice to review every 5 years, and that's what. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
I have another question, and that is, you've got a budget for year one. I just wondered, should there be estimates for later years?
Do you mean for
yes,
it's a special. It's so basically what this meaning is, Anne, is this is it's about a one-off cost to the council every 4 to 5 years. That's why it's in there. But it's something we need to do. No, it's still on PGR 21, Pauline. It's the 150,000 in year one expenditure. Anne was asking why it wasn't repeating, because it's a one-off cost.
The reason is it's the tail of the expenditure that's been going on for quite a while, and it'll stop when the local plan update finishes.
Sorry, in the description of the bid, it says work has commenced on a new plan, though the scale of work means this will span over further financial years.
Yeah, I think that paper was probably put in last year. So what I'm saying with this one is this is the tail end of last year's bid. We shouldn't see this year. The reason we're seeing it this year is because the local plan update is later, not complete, and therefore we've got the highways bit of the local plan update is also not complete because they're going together, hand in hand.
So
That makes sense.
So that text is sort of dates from
Well, I think it's last year's text, Dan.
Right, okay, thank you.
I know it's confusing, I agree.
Okay, thank you, Pauline. We're now going to go on to a bunch by Wayne. PGR 23, 24, 25, 26 and 27, of which we've partially done 27 already.
Yes, and can I just, sorry.
Go ahead, Wayne.
Right. Could I just say that 20R23 and 25 should be together because they are the same thing. They're enforcement and planning appeals. I apologise for that. So the 265, if you were looking at it, it would be 265 in the first column, then 450 in the second column and 00 in the next column.
Yeah. Also on that for it was 26, wasn't it?
27. The point
yes.
that Clive made.
Sorry, I was looking at 26. Can we have the supporting evidence not be a hyperlink next time?
All right.
Because it's a supporting evidence business case and it's literally a link. So it's a little difficult to press that on a thing. And I did actually try it on the digital version and I do not have access, so it's a bit useless.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, Does anyone have any questions on these other than my minor points? Clive?
Yeah, Wayne, on R23, it says that we have a poor housing land supply position. It says that in supporting evidence, trend analysis, business case reference. Does that mean that our 5-year land supply is looking a bit doubtful?
It's getting close to the wire, Clive. I won't lie to you. And hence the reason why we were keen to get the consultation started on the local plan, but we are still at 5.23. But I think you'll be aware of this. What we're going to have to consider is if we get any closer to the wire, we're going to have to consider reserve sites, because that's the only, and you know as well as I do, we've got a fantastic QC, and he hasn't let us down yet. But he's only as good as what he's working with, and a couple of the bigger appeals that we had. Well, one that started just as COVID happened, that was the one in Finch Hampstead. And at the start of that appeal, they said quite clearly that they weren't going to challenge us on the 5-year land supply. But as it gets closer to the wire and the appeals now have been delayed for some time, yeah, we are going to get very close to that. So we're going to have to make sure that we look at potential reserve sites.
Yeah, I think you are absolutely 100% right. But should there be any money in for next year?
Money is in for next year.
No.
Yeah, sorry.
22-23 is 0 on page.
Oh, sorry.
R23.
You're right. You're correct.
Yeah, sorry, Clyde. Just now, I said PGR 25 and 23. The 265 should actually be sat in. They should be together. So we should be reading PGR 23 and 25 together. So you have 265, and then you have 350 plus the 100 in there. So yes, that's 265.
Yep, and taking the 2 pages, that's £700,000. So could be 7 public inquiries. So I think you're probably doing enough, putting enough money there. I think you are.
Yeah, but let's not forget the 5-year land supply. As I said, only as good as what we hand him.
Yeah, because I think that if we are going to get tight, the developers, barristers, they're all going to be very keen to challenge us and to challenge that 5-year land supply. So you're absolutely right, putting all of this resource behind it.
Yeah, thanks.
Alison?
Okay, could you explain, Wayne, in R23, it says 10 enforcement notices were served March to June 2020 and are likely to end up at appeal. In R25, it says April/May equals 10. See attached brief. I'm not sure what attached brief means. But these are quite old figures. Could you tell me more about how many enforcement notices have been served this year in 21 to understand how we're looking going forward with likely appeals?
Sorry, I'm going to call Marcia in here because I don't want to mix up what I call small enforcement notice to the ones that we actually have to go to court on, because they're the ones that actually cost us money. Small enforcement notices around minor household things don't actually cost us much money because we can resolve those. But Marcia, do you know the answer to that?
It would just take me 2 minutes to look that up.
Is there any more questions on
Yes, there was one from Anne. And
Could you explain why it says see attached brief on R25 in the supporting evidence?
Are we missing a document that was also a hyperlink? Okay. It'd be nice to see that brief, even if it's just a paragraph summary. So can you take that as an action away, Wayne, so that we get that note?
Yeah, I'm just looking.
Or R25.
Are you reading that from page 86?
Correct. It says in additional comments, see attached briefing note. And unless there was something else attached.
I'll look into that, guy. Sorry.
Yeah. Can we have a paragraph telling us what that brief was, or the attached brief itself? It'd be useful to see that in context.
Yeah, oh yes, I see it now. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Thank you. Anne, you indicated you had a question.
Yes, it's about R26. It's just it says bid name, temporary increase in planning application fee and income. How temporary is the increase and by what amount?
The planning, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, the planning application fees all went up in fees and charges last year by, was it a 3%?
I'm not sure the exact figure. I was talking to Marcia about this yesterday. Marcia will know the detail on actually what the rates went up by. I think a lot of this is to do with a lot more demand in the system that we've been talking about, councillor. So there's a lot more planning applications coming in the system, and that of course generates more money as well. So Marcia, I don't know if you're around to just talk about the increases last year as well.
Yes, so just going back to the first question, we have served 9 enforcement notices so far this year. We've certainly got at least another 6 likely to be served by the end of the year. Enforcement notices generally end up in appeal, and it's generally a public inquiry. So potentially a lot more appeals and inquiries next year. Planning application fees are set nationally, but because we have had a 30% increase in planning applications this year, which is why we've also got the bid for the additional staff, that increase in planning applications has generated an increase in fee income, and that's why we're suggesting we will exceed our expected target by about 100,000, possibly even a bit more.
All right, thanks. So why is it described as a temporary increase then?
Well, because we don't, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, at the beginning of this year, we had just had Brexit. We were just coming out of the pandemic. We expected a lot of people to be made redundant at the end of the furlough scheme. We really thought we were going into a recession. And suddenly we had this bubble, this increase in planning application numbers and pressure. And we thought, is this just a bubble? We didn't know that it was going to be ongoing. But now we're at November. And it has continued, it's been sustained throughout the year, but we don't know if it's going to continue year after year. It's just so hard to predict what's going to happen.
So it's only a temporary increase, Anne? It's money,
thanks very much.
so it should be regarded as a good thing.
Yeah, yes, yeah. Okay, thank you. Windfall.
Okay, thank you. Going to move quickly on to PGR 28, which is Parry. With the trading standards and environmental health back to the BBC.
Just interrupt you there. I don't think it is Parry. I think that comes back to me. 28.
I think you're right. I think you are 100% right, Bill. But this is Parry in the thing.
Yeah, it does.
It's
only.
Yeah, I don't know why that's come up as. No, yeah, it says lead member Parry. I don't know why that is. Oh well, must be an error in the documents. Carry on, Bill.
Any questions?
Any questions on that one? Anne?
Well, I'm not sure if it is that one because I can't see it under R28, but it doesn't seem to have a bid reference. So it's the record underneath R28 in the table about an ecology officer. And oh, it must be somewhere, mustn't it? Because I must have seen it. My question is.
That is my.
Sorry.
Parry. That part of it is Parry.
Oh, is it?
I think this. So this is one that probably splits between the two different departments, and whoever flipped the coin, Stephen, that's probably you. It went up as Parry in the sign-off document for some reason.
I think we're referring here to the reintegration of our enforcement and safety service, aren't we? Under PGR 28. What's listed, effectively what this is, just to remind members, so the text in this document is old text, because this is obviously what happened when you took the decision last year to make this move, and at the time there was two amounts of £250,000 made available, one in 21-22 and one in 22-23, and because the project is going to finish in this financial year, this effectively talks about that £250,000 being moved from next year into this year. So the 250 for next year will be used in this year. So therefore the 250 for next year will not be needed, if that makes sense. But of course it is needed. It's needed in this year. Sorry about the complexity. So £500,000 in total to deliver that, and hopefully that clarifies. Or if it's confused you, I'll try and explain a bit more.
Thank you for that. The thing is though, it's about the ecology officer, and I can't find a table on it now. I'm sure it's
the reason why, and is because the ecology officer is actually under 50,000, so we haven't actually got a bid report for it. So we only get bid reports for 50,000, and it's in the main tables at about 45 or something like that.
Yes.
So that's where it is.
So is it not appropriate to ask a question?
It might be worthwhile reaching out. Parry, do you want to just quickly comment on that, and then as Anne was looking for it?
The ecology officer is really to comment on planning applications and new responsibilities under the environmental bill going through Parliament at the moment. So that is the bid 45 for £45,000, and that is the requirement for an ecology officer. Maybe Fran Hobson might want to jump in here and explain a bit more.
Hi there. So we have put in a special item for next year to allow us to recruit an additional ecology officer to support with not only our existing responsibilities to provide consultation responses to planning applications in relation to ecology, but also, as Parry just said, the Environment Bill has just recently gained royal assent, and we are expecting a number of new responsibilities on local authorities to come forward over the next couple of years. So that special item will help to support with the increase in planning applications that we've seen, as well as getting us prepared to take on those new responsibilities.
Thank you. I just wondered why it was 1 year only. It sounds maybe...
Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, it's 1 year at the moment because central government have said that they will be offering up grant funding to local authorities to help support with their new responsibilities. But at the moment, that grant funding hasn't been decided, the amount hasn't been decided, so it's not clear how much we'll be getting, and we won't be getting anything within the next year. But we know that we're going to have to set ourselves up to take on those responsibilities, so we need someone in place to help us do that. And as well as that, the bid document, I don't know whether you've got access to it, but it explains that the number of planning applications that our officer is being consulted on has increased significantly. So he's currently being consulted on something like 800 applications, more than that, and that's more than doubled in the last few years. So it's not sustainable for one person to be doing that, and that's why we need the additional support to help out with that as well. And then if it turns out that later down the line or the following year we still need additional support, we'll either put in another special item or a growth bid, permanent growth bid.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. 29, PGR 29, which is Gregor. Any questions on that? Okay, no questions. In that case then, which might I remind members in regards to PGR 30, this is an ongoing process. Please be aware in any questions you've got on that, which is Bill. Any questions for Bill on that? Clive?
I'm assuming, Bill, that this £300,000 of additional expenditure in the next financial year doesn't include any divorce settlement from West Berkshire and Bracknell. Is that right?
Yeah, doesn't include any divorce settlement. That's still being obviously negotiated because of staff transfers and any redundancies that may occur. At the moment, we are in a very good position. We've had a lot of staff transfer over, and we are now advertising for staff for this post. So until that is all finalised, we can't actually say what that those figures will be. But that this figure does not include that.
Okay, thanks for confirming that. West Berkshire Council executive minutes, 14th of October, which is a public document, says that they could be looking for as much as £793,000 as a divorce settlement.
I think that was an early figure.
All right.
I think the situation has changed dramatically since then.
That's
Steve,
good.
Necessary, but that was a very early figure. Sorry, did you hear that echo?
Yes, sorry, I did hear that, and I said that's very good if the figure has been significantly reduced, but I didn't see it anywhere else in these papers that we should be putting aside any money for what you can loosely call a divorce settlement.
I think the question Clive is asking is there any possibility of the divorce settlement being in the papers, as it were, before the budget is set in February?
I can pick that up one, Chair.
Bill, you went and muted yourself if that way.
Sorry. Yeah, I was going to say, I think if Steve can correct me, but I think we were hoping to have this by the sometime in December, that figure.
Yes. I mean, officers from both councils continue to discuss this from what's commonly termed liabilities situation. I think it wouldn't be right and proper for us to make any assumptions of any liabilities that we should be suggesting that Wokingham as a council picks up until it's known. The figures do keep fluctuating depending on who you're talking to, but as Councillor Soames said, the risks are mitigating on a week by week basis. So I think at this stage it would be too early to commit to any figure to go into any budget process for 22-23. I think Councillor Kaiser mentioned earlier on that there is the ability for officers to seek in-year provision through supplementary estimates, and if the need comes about, that's the process we will certainly look to go down if required. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's just a case of keep us informed, and if something does come forward on that, let us know, because we've got the January meeting, haven't we? That'll be the appropriate place for that to be done.
That's fine, Guy. Thank you.
It's all gone quiet.
Okay, moving on to capital. So I'm going to do it a page at a time for this one. So PGC 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Paul?
Yeah, could I have a question actually on the managing congestion, please?
Isn't that's the carryover for this year, isn't it?
Yeah, the top line. My understanding was, and looking back at previous documentation, there was 17 million in that budget. That now appears to have reduced significantly. Is that correct?
I'll need to get Andy to comment on how much has been spent this year, but remember this is not the full budget. This is only what's left. Do you want to add anything, Andy?
Yeah, I was going to add, Paul, this is a reprofiling. The initial expected pace of expenditure has been slightly slower, so we're reprofiling the budget. The total spend hasn't changed. It's just all you're seeing is the next 3 years.
So it still remains at 17 million then?
It actually was at 20 million, Paul. If you see what you saw was last year's figure, which was the second year. There was 3 million before that.
So in other words, the pandemic has slowed progress down.
No, I don't think so. I think the plan was originally done 3 years ago, and capital budgets, as you start to define what you're going to do, changes the profile of the spend. When that budget was put in, they had some bright ideas, but they didn't have all the detail about the costings or about when you could do what, or when the road space was available to do what, and all that sort of stuff. So it's a matter of refining it as you get more detail. Is that fair, Andy?
That's absolutely fair. Yeah.
Okay, that's a fair enough answer. Paul, do you have anything else?
On C1, structural maintenance, you've got the same figure for each year, but with rising costs. Well, that to me will result in less square meterage being treated.
This isn't the pothole end of structural maintenance. This is the actual non-pothole end of structural maintenance. We've actually got road repairing in various different buckets in here, and the total spend on road repairing is about 5.28 million per annum, not what looks like 2.28 million per annum, which is what is in that particular line. And that's a massive increase, certainly since I became executive member, where we've significantly increased our spend on highways maintenance. And who knows what next year will be, but that's what it is. It looks smaller than it is because of the way the budget is split up.
Thank you for that, Pauline. But if I look at previous year's approved budget for info, it's 2.678, so it's reduced.
No, because the budget is in several different buckets. It's
not what it says here.
Well, I think it's that bucket is reduced. The total spend is 5.28, and that has not reduced. But
this bucket's gone down a bit, but something else has gone up. Is that what you're saying?
Paul, I just have to jump in. Accounting wise, you have to be a little bit careful of previous years because of the way in which structural maintenance works, as I know you're aware, sometimes you end up deferring schemes into future years, and sometimes what that looks like in terms of last year's might include some schemes from the year before, or or not include some schemes that we've actually done this year, which makes it a little bit confusing. You're right, that figure in the original budget figure for structural maintenance in that bid has remained the same each year for quite a while. But as Pauline pointed out, what we added was the WIS funding, which gives us significantly more funding to structural maintenance work.
And we also had, I recall last year, some government, was it last year before, some government funding as well, which it got added on top of it. Yeah, so we're always up for extra government funding if they want to give us some. There's certainly no intention to reduce the maintenance budget.
Anne?
I'm not sure if it is under C3. It's a couple of rows below it, but it's about the highway infrastructure flood alleviation schemes. And I was wondering, is that certain specific areas, or is it a widespread budget for numerous flood areas across the borough? It's only in 1 year, isn't it? It's only a budget in 1 year.
I've just brought Fran.
Yeah, so I don't think this one has a bid sheet in it because it wasn't being included for scrutiny, but it does appear on one of the lines. So that particular budget was provided by members a number of years ago, and the idea of the budget was to reduce flood risks to a number of the highways across the borough. What we decided was actually we'd try and look at reducing or using the main amount of that funding to reduce flood risk to Showcase Roundabout. And we are looking at a scheme which is south of the motorway, the M4, to hold back water and reduce flood risk along Lower Alleyway and Showcase Roundabout, working with a number of stakeholders on that scheme as well. So it's a large scale scheme. It's going to take a number of years to deliver. But that's what that funding will contribute towards. We've got to work with the Environment Agency and other stakeholders as well to gain additional funding. But that's what that's for.
Okay, thank you.
Clive?
Thank you, Guy. This is PGC2, the early footbridge. So we've got £6,800,000 as an approximate cost for this. That means it's gone down a little bit from when we last talked about it, Andy, because it was between 7 and 8 million then. And
just let me jump in, Clive, before you ask the question. It might be, you might be missing the fact that actually that's year 2 funding. There's already funding late in last year, which we haven't spent yet. So the full budget, I think, is 7.5.
Yeah.
It's just doesn't show on these figures because it's all
this financial way of presenting figures doesn't help any of us. I don't think it's difficult for you guys to understand. It's difficult.
Well, all it shows here is 6.8, but I take what you say, and that's fine, Andy. Does this include the option to have lifts at the footbridge, and does it include access to the London-bound carriageway?
So the answer on the London, by that you mean the additional ramp down to the London-bound platform, don't you?
Yes. Yeah.
And the answer to that is at the moment no. On lifts, because this is a budget. Remember, this is a bid that was based on a scheme which we were developing last year. It hasn't taken account yet of any of our recent discussions because those haven't concluded. The lifts wise, I have not costed lifts yet, so I don't know whether it includes those. I suspect there might be a price difference between ramps and lifts, but I don't know what it is. If we get to that stage, then we'll look at it. It's going to take more than 1 year to construct, if I'm honest, Clive. So we will always have some time to adjust the figure if we need to.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, not seeing anyone indication for the rest of that page, so we'll move on to the second page, which is PGC 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12. Paul.
C8, the A327 cycleway.
Yep.
Whilst this is important, vital cycle link, and I welcome it, I'm a bit shocked by the additional request for 400,000 when the original scheme was estimated at 600. That's either poor estimating the cost of this scheme, or something's gone horribly wrong somewhere. Comments?
I'd have to take that away in detail, as you know, until you've actually designed a scheme and got it up and running. You don't know the real cost, but I'm happy to take that away and get a bit more detail if you want it.
Yes, please, on that.
I'm actually looking forward to getting it built.
Yeah, me too.
On C6, the LC WIP budget request 1.2 million for each of the next 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
But then you've got nothing beyond that. What about any future planning on sustainable transport?
Maybe it's my misunderstanding, but I thought we were concentrating on next year's budget. I mean, if you look at the amount of money we're spending on sustainable transport in this year's budget, if you total all the bits of cycleways up, it's more than 5 million, I think. So there is certainly plenty of intention to spend money on sustainable transport, and I can't see any reason why that won't continue into the future.
That wasn't my question, Pauline. My question was about C6 and the development of the LC WIP. So this is future forecasting and planning for sustainable walking and cycling.
Oh, I see what you mean.
So
it's
beyond
2023,
it suddenly stops. So my question is, what's going to happen after that?
Andy, I would suggest we'll probably continue, but
I think the answer is government funding and government positions on this are a little bit uncertain, and we've covered ourselves for the next 2 years, and no doubt we'll be coming back with an extension of that funding in some form or another next year when we look at the year 3.
I would hope so. Certainly the intent.
Okay. So on C9, there's 0.5 million has been reprofiled from 21-22, and then it continues at $1 million a year. The council's climate emergency action plan, which is target 4.5, indicates the need to spend 33 million by 2030 on walking and cycling, which is probably significantly underestimated, I would say, because looking at the draft LC WIP, and this is with my highways engineering hat on, and looking at just the primary routes, I would estimate that would cost 50 million investment. And then you've got secondary and the rest of the network, which will probably cost another 50 million. So you've got potentially 100 million there. So given the importance of this, why is it slipping? And also with a profile of $1 million a year.
Well, it's not $1 million a year.
Well, you've got $1 million for next year, and then it continues. You'll only get 8 million to 2030.
So if I point out the things on this capital budget that are down to sustainable transport, we've got new foot and cycle structures of 1.5 million. We've got a new bid for safer routes to school of 150,000. We've got local cycling and walking infrastructure plan of 1.2 million. We've got the A329M, sorry, not the cycleway we just talked about. We've got the Wokingham Borough Cycle Network expenditure of 1.5 million. There's a lot of cycle and walking infrastructure expenditure in here. It's just not all in one place. It's spread across individual projects across the capital plan. I think that is ambitious but affordable.
You've just read out a list which you lost me after the first one. Sorry.
So if you go, do you want me to send you an email which details all the budget items that have got cycling and walking in them? It might be easier. You can send it to the committee. I totted it up before the meeting. It was over 5 million.
That might be beneficial
Yeah,
in that regard.
Yeah.
Totals what? I missed what.
Sorry, repeat that total, Pauline.
Well, let me send you the list. I need to add it up in my head. So.
Yeah, send me the list because I can't see that totals at anything near 30 million.
I didn't say 30 million. I said 5.
5.
That's okay. 1 year. So there's 9 years between now and 2030.
So 5 million next year. That means there's got to be 25 million spent over the next 8-9 years to get to 30 million.
Which is doable. Actually, what I'm more interested in is the linking up all the cycleways and really improving the cycle and walking infrastructure in a way that we can afford.
You're really enjoying that electric bike, aren't you?
Yeah, if you could send me your totted up list because I can't see where those figures are come from.
Send that to the whole committee. Paul, just
Shirley.
Thank you, Guy. This is probably a bit of a silly question and will show up my ignorance of electric vehicle charging, but just out of interest, do we actually make any money out of electric vehicle charging? I mean, you have to put money in a slot, presumably. I'm sorry to show my ignorance.
So the way the electric vehicle sorry, you've got your microphone on. It's all right, Shirley. Sorry, it's a bit awkward. This, apologies. The way the electric vehicle charging works is that we will get a commercial arrangement with a company to operate our electric vehicle charging points, and that they will do the maintenance and the operation. I'm hoping we'll take account of the new government guidelines and make sure that these are all touch card sensitive and we don't end up with thousands of different methods of paying for individual charging points. But the idea is to make them at least cost neutral, possibly generate a revenue.
Thank you.
Clive.
Thank you, Guy. C7, which is charging points. It is really good to see that we're going to be spending quite a bit of money on this. How many charging points is this extra £4 million going to give us? Do you know?
Andy?
Very difficult question to answer, Clive. Yeah. I think it's a very immature market. To give you an example, we're about to invest about £240,000 in about 70 charging points, and that's under a sort of pilot project. But I think by the time we get into years 2 and 3, the market might have changed. So I'm not sure how many it will give. I wouldn't like to give you a number, but if you wanted to pro rata that figure of £250,000 buys you about 70 odd chargers, and that's a reasonable estimate at the moment at current values.
I think you're right. I think they will go down in 3 years' time. You'll get much more than 70 charging points for your 240 grand. I think you're right. So if that's what you've been taking into consideration, that's good.
Well, I think that the other side of it is, of course, that it depends not only on the cost of the actual the units themselves and the installation, but the profit in selling electricity. And you may find that in the end, we don't have to spend any of this money because the operators themselves decide actually it's a worthwhile putting them in for us. But, you know, that's, as I say, it's a very immature market and we just have to wait and see where it goes.
Yeah, the thing I found interesting was on the car charging apps, there's people who actually charge people to use their personal charging on their drive. Yeah. And you can actually make a profit on that as well. It's quite an interesting concept. So crowdsourcing of charging points is quite a good idea, really.
Great. It's the same as people renting out their car parking spaces around Heathrow on their driveways. But I must admit, 3.5, about that, it's 10 past 10 in the evening. My maths isn't good, but 3.5k or 3.6k per charging spot around the borough. That's actually pretty damn good value. So that's impressive, to say the least. You were indicating this one. Sam, did you want to have a question?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question was, are we able to, what's the difference between cost of those, you get a slow charging point versus the one that charges your car quite quickly, or is there no difference? And if there isn't a difference, which I don't know if there is or not, could we get more of the fast charging points? Because I know sometimes I hear issues of someone's ran out of charge and then they've turned up the charge point and they can't get to where they need to get to, and it takes too long to charge and they're stuck.
So the limiting factor, Sam, is the infrastructure around your charging point. So we do have some faster chargers, although not, I think we haven't put any of the ultra fast chargers in any of our off-street locations. On-street locations, I think at the moment tend to be the slower chargers, the overnight type trickle charge things. And that's mainly because, you know, the actual power supply they're taking off is the lamp column power supply. And if you do the fast charge, you need to significantly increase the actual infrastructure, power infrastructure in the streets.
I think they need phase 3, don't they, Andy?
Yeah, they do. It's
3 phase, yeah.
It's quite a big take on the power, and that, you know, that we might get to that, Sam, at some point in the future. But so here we go.
I think the other problem at the moment is that not all cars are compatible with all charging points as well. So it's unnecessarily complicated at the moment. It'd be nice if we had a bit more standardisation.
No, I completely agree. I mean, I know it's not a straightforward issue. It's just something which has just come up where, you know, as you know, I think even we had a few months ago, a lady outside the council meeting here, I think, had stopped her car and it was quite late, and you'd find yourself getting stuck, don't you, in odd times. But thank you.
I think the other point with that, and I need to ask Norman because he knows more about batteries than I do, but is fast charging and what it does to your battery life.
Yeah, that's the other aspect, and we do at least know how many councillors it takes to charge an electric car now.
We'll work out how.
Yeah, the other question I have, just thinking about this, is in regards to the electricity delivery network, which is Southern Electric in this region. So Scottish Southern, isn't it? Just because we're putting in all of these power chargers for cars, I assume that during the process that we have actually approached SSE and made sure that all of the transformers in the local grid can basically take us chucking in 70 on this area, because this is a concern that they've had in neighborhoods of some colleagues at work, not necessarily in the UK, but in other parts of Europe and the US, where effectively they've put in their electric charging points and are then browning out the network, their local power networks, due to infrastructure not having been invested in for 40, 50 years. So has that consideration been taken into account?
I'm sure it'll be part of the design process, but it's interesting that the government today have made car charging for new houses and also for major developments in industrial premises with more than 10 parking places compulsory. So that's going to really drive the demand for the electricity network and the stress on it. So it's going to be very interesting to see.
Last time I spoke we had a presentation from the National Grid about a year ago, and their view was that as long as you're talking about trickle charge, where it's predominantly overnight charging, then the network can take that level of new infrastructure. It's the fast charge that really takes power.
Comes back to the previous interesting question about fast charging.
So in other words, we need that answers the question on the trickle charge bit, but we otherwise have the problem of the kettle and a half-time situation going on here, where the power grid gets a spike at half-time of a major football match because everyone goes and puts the kettle on. Maybe I'm showing my age here.
Don't I know it, Mr. Chairman?
That was Parry.
Yeah, what did you say?
He's trying to put his kettle on.
What's his Horlicks?
Mine's an Earl Grey. Okay, where were we? Does anyone else have anything on 6 to 12? Oh, Anne?
Just like to ask, what is SCAPE, please?
Oh, that's the other half. It's more of the road infrastructure. So it's the big development roads. So the North Woking Distributor Road and all those sort of things. So big contract roads.
It's a contract that we've signed, and with Balfour Beatty, to deliver the SDL new roads. So the North Woking Distributor Road, South Woking Distributor Road, the not the Eastern Relief Road, the Arborfield Relief Road, and a couple of other smaller projects.
Thank
But
you,
it's,
Andy.
it's a framework agreement. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what it is.
Right, thank you.
Would have probably helped if we'd said that, wouldn't it?
We always get used to all our own jargon, don't we?
Yeah, indeed.
The text in under C10, it doesn't fill you in very much.
No, it doesn't help, does
It's a
it?
bit brief.
Consider my hat slapped.
Yeah. Okay, we'll move on to the 16 and 15, which I believe is actually John Kaiser, which is the, oh, well, maybe Pauline will know this one, a new bid from the Berkshire Records Office, so she might know that one.
I do indeed.
Did I?
Do you want me to?
There isn't a 14 and 15.
Berkshire Record Office?
I think, sorry, the master document I was referring to at the front appears to have cut off 2. Sorry, 14 and 15. Yeah, how did that happen?
Oh, yeah, they're missing.
They're missing because
14's further down. They're further down. They're out of order.
Yeah, further down.
They're Parry's. 16 and they're out of order. Yeah, 16 and 15.
So 16 is the extension for the Berkshire Records Office to allow us to store the expected amount of new records coming in over the next few years.
You just know that because you've been involved with it, because you like the Berkshire Records Office. And does anyone have anything on 15, which is Gorse Ride?
John Kaiser.
That's John Kaiser, yeah. They were both listed under John, 16 and 15. 5.
Yep. How many new houses will this give us? Maybe I've just seen it. 249.
249. Yeah, that's it.
I think we can forgive you, Clive. It is late. Anyone else on these, or do we move to Parry's? Okay, we'll go to 14, 17, 18, and 19. Any questions on that? Paul?
Yeah, 17. There's a significant reprofiling from 21-22 into the 2 next years. Why is the programme slipping so badly?
Parry, do you want me to jump in on this one?
Okay.
Yeah, so one of the main routes that we were intending on delivering this financial year, we had some significant issues that came up. We had a consultation with residents, and they were unhappy with the route that we had proposed, despite previous consultations which hadn't given us that indication. So we've had to look at changing that particular route and liaising more heavily with some of the residents and the Residents Association. So that's why, unfortunately, we weren't able to deliver that scheme this year, and we were hoping that we were going to be able to. We've had to delay it until we're able to come up with an alternative solution. Thank you.
Anyone else, or okay, I've got one quickly on PG19, which is the eco crematorium. Whereabouts are we on that? Because I know this is a topic that we have discussed several times in this committee.
Guy.
Yeah.
Guy. Remember that this is the old, you're going to get another iteration of this, and it's quite possible some of these capital bids will disappear because they're not stacking up, partly because of the cost to build, and this may be one of them. So we haven't yet bottomed this out. So we're left it in there, but in the next iteration, you might find it is no longer there, and there will be an explanation as to why it won't be there.
Okay, that's fair enough. If that's the case, then that basically goes on to that particular page, which is, I believe it's 47, as it were, on the main list document, where we're actually talking about basically the explanations on what some bids aren't there, which makes complete logical sense, because a lot of them have already been basically covered off, such as item 7, which is the carbon capture, and the mandatory disabled facilities grants. Those are effectively statutory, so they make sense. And the carbon capture planting of trees has already been covered in an executive report, so we've already got that detail. So that makes sense, John. Right, members, I'm very conscious of time right now. We have still. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I didn't realise you'd done.
Quickly then, Clive.
Your microphone's not on, Clive.
C14, Bill, can you tell me what a Civica system is? I'm sure it's very simple, but I haven't got a clue what it is.
Let me come off. Let me say that one's come out the blue to me, so I'm going to pass to Steve on that one.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine, Bill. That's the IT software needed for our new enforcement safety colleagues out on the ground. So that'll be things like tablets, Clive, and obviously so they can work remotely and efficiently.
Fine. So that's something they can use on their mobiles, which you've made clear there. Thanks. C18, this is the new sports centre to serve North and South Wokingham SDLs. What sort of facilities are we planning on putting into the sports centre? Have we thought about that yet?
Hi there. Yeah, so like you just said, it's to serve North and South Wokingham. Originally, we were looking at an outdoor only facility. We are now considering indoor use as well. We have only just recruited the master planners for the work, though. So much of the work that the master planners will be doing will be to look at what is required, what the community are looking for, as well as looking at the policy requirements from both North and South Wokingham SDLs that are being delivered.
This £4 million, that was for outdoor facilities, was it?
Yes, originally for outdoor facilities, but we are considering whether there's a need for indoor facilities as well. And we'll get that information from much wider consultation with residents, sports associations, liaising with the sports and leisure team, etc. Thank you.
Okay. I did see Paul. First things first. I'm going to take a straw poll around members here. We are currently about what I would describe halfway through. After Paul's questions, we've effectively finished place and growth. We've still got community insights and resource and assets to go. I think in reality, I don't think we can do them justice this evening in the half hour remain, because the other point is I'm going to need to ask to vote to extend the meeting. We need to vote to extend the meeting just so we can go through the agenda for next meeting. But I think we are going to need the backup meeting on December 13th. just to go through this. What are members' opinions on that? Because this is an important piece of work. We do need to do it in detail. And we've had a lot of very good conversation and debate tonight, and also some ideas running around. But I do think we need to give this due course. So, Clive?
100% agree with you, Guy.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I think that's unanimous. We will go ahead with December 13th. And also, can I get I will propose it just so that we don't formally get pinged. Can I vote to extend the meeting for the extra half hour just so we can get through the final bits in the next 4 minutes? Okay. Thank you. That's carried. So,
Chairman,
yeah.
Could I ask that perhaps any questions we've got just about some clarity or understanding we could all perhaps put in advance of the meeting? We all know what we mean. You know, some of the questions where their English was terrible or there was nothing attached. Let's try and get that in like this week ahead of the meeting in December, and then we can just concentrate on digging in deep.
Yep. No, I completely agree with that. So, John, Graham, and to the teams of insights and revenue and assets, I think you can disappear now, but we will have to see you on December 13th. I hope this has been useful, but yeah, Paul, do you want to ask your question? I know you're indicating, but I thought I needed to interject there.
Yeah, if I could just ask one on the public rights of way network. I know it's not a bid, but there's significant slippage again in that profile for 21-22 going into the next 2 years. What's the reason for that?
Hi, that's me again. So that is for the Loddon long distance path, which is to deliver a greenway that runs from Swallowfield all the way up to the north of the borough, running parallel to the Loddon. The issues that we've had here is that a lot of the land which is next to the River Loddon isn't owned by the borough council, and so naturally we need the permission of the landowners who own the land adjoining next to the River Loddon, and we've had some serious issues with landowner negotiations in relation to that. So we're pressing ahead, we're getting there. Fingers crossed we'll be able to progress more rapidly over the coming year.
Good luck with dealing with fishing associations.
Thank you, Fran.
Thank you.
Graham, you've appeared. Did you want to say anything?
Say goodnight.
Say goodnight.
Well, yeah, that's a good idea. I will do that. But just to add that
members,
when we
go
come,
ahead, Graham.
Okay, thanks. When we come back in December, it's highly unlikely we'll have the local government finance settlement. So, of course, we'll need the January as well.
Was there ever any doubt in that regard? I mean, I believe you got it one year on like December 23rd at like 4 o'clock in the evening. So I completely understand that, Graham. If that's the case, we will move on to our forward plan. I think we've exhausted the questions for this part this evening. To those that didn't get a chance to speak, I apologise, but we were obviously going into more detail than we anticipated. And to thank you for attending this evening. We're now going on to the boring bit, which is our forward plan. All the way to the back. So we've already discussed December 13th. We will just be covering off the finish of this, together with any further updates that we receive. So let's try and keep it light for that evening. January 5th, get ready for the intense one, because we've basically got the final part of the medium-term financial plan, the borough-wide parking management strategy, the in-house services update, and building control and planning enforcement. If anyone wants to put anything else on that, I will throw something at them, because I think we've got enough. Callum.
Just on that, Chairman, I think it might be worth me just liaising with Graham and John. I don't want to end up in another situation like tonight where, if as a result of the local government finance settlement, there are if there's extra detail that members need to look through, I don't want to end up in a situation where we run out of time again. So if I liaise with them and then send you an email, it might be that something has to give that meeting.
Yeah, I've also did we have a backup on January 13th or something like that? Or something I can't remember.
No, there was a suggestion. There was a suggestion of a February meeting to cover off some other things. So yeah, we could look at that.
We may have to if needed. Let's go for it. February is interesting.
If there's champagne and chocolates.
I'm right now scheduled to be in potentially Kuala Lumpur, so that'll be interesting. Okay, and then in March we've got the flood risk management update, the police and fire update. Hopefully they'll turn up this time, and then the domestic abuse contract update 6 months in. And I think that basically sums it up. It's a lot of work still to be doing, but yeah. Any comments or criticisms on that so far? No.
Is there anything else that we talked about previously that is on the list for considering that? Or
not. There are some things. There's an item that Paul mentioned at the previous meeting, which that was the subject of the February meeting. So I'm in discussion with officers regarding that. So it's just a case of getting the green light from them and from executive members as to whether or not to go ahead. So
yeah.
But other than that, I think you as a committee have covered an extraordinary amount of work in the past sort of 7-8 months. So
yeah. I think there were a few things where we said we didn't need an officer to come, but we'd like a report. Yeah, I think there was something like things like the burial capacity, which we were pretty certain was okay, but it was just a written update, wasn't it? We don't need to.
Yeah, that's being worked on.
Yeah.
And then we've also had the advantage that management has stepped up to the plate on a couple of aspects that would have been in our remit due to time issue. Because the report seems to go back to government and things like that, so they've taken a bit of a load in that regard. So, yeah, this is still the hardest working committee on this council. Sometimes it feels like. With that, at about 10:33, I think I will draw the meeting to a close. Everyone who was watching and attending this evening remotely, thank you very much, and to those watching on online, I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a very pleasant evening.